Well, good morning. I have a 9:55 here, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to the AgBiz Masters Kickoff Meeting. Looking around the room today, it's evident that the future of agriculture is bright. It's great to see so many young and beginning farmers interested in improving your skills for the future. So my name is Kayla Wilson. I have the pleasure of serving as the Training and Events Coordinator for Ag Choice Farm Credit, where I help to coordinate and to execute these events and trainings for both Ag Choice employees as well as the agricultural community. So I'm joining from the new Ag Choice 7 Mountains office in Reedsville. I'm here with about 15 participants today as well as some alumni. AgBiz really holds a special place in my heart, as it was really one of the first projects that I worked on almost 4 years ago with Ag Choice. So through the years, I've taken on kind of this expanded role and now serve as the main program administrator. So I have the pleasure of serving as your contact for any questions or information that you have or need for the program. So as we kick off today's meeting, I want to make special recognition of the partnership network that makes AgBiz Masters possible each year. This network of over 25 supporting organizations have really helped to broaden the reach of AgBiz and continue to improve, my PowerPoint's sticking here, continue to improve the program and helping to meet this ever-changing needs of today's farmers. So we really want to show some extra appreciation to Ag Choice and Mid-Atlantic Farm Credit for hosting the meetings at local offices and also providing much of the facilitation for the meetings throughout the years. This collaboration for this program is really a unique characteristic and shows the industry support of the future of agriculture and you guys as young and beginning farmers. So as you know, AgBiz is a geared towards young and beginning farmers. We this year have a total of 183 participants ranging from 5 states here. So we've got 104 year 1 participants as well as 79 year 2 participants. So welcome. So as participants, you represent a variety of agricultural industries, and we had a great opportunity this morning to go around the room in Reedsville here this morning and get to know each other and share different things about our individual operations and where we come from, our background, our years participating, that kind of thing. So AgBiz, we're in our 10th season. It's really been a successful program that has reached over 1,200 young and beginning farmers. A vast majority, again, in that Maryland, Delaware, PA region. It includes 466 graduates, so those folks who have completed all necessary modules and meeting materials for both year 1 and year 2. Today we have more than 130 participants joining us this morning from not 100 locations, how about 13 locations. So you can kind of see via the screen there, we have kind of the Brady Bunch video conferencing screen. So we're really blessed to be able to do a program like this, utilizing this video conferencing technology. So it might be something new, but we really appreciate what this technology has to offer and the way that we can connect all the offices. Today, obviously, is the kickoff meeting for AgBiz. So we've got a couple goals that we'd like to accomplish here today. The first being networking. We had that opportunity already and we'll continue to talk through that throughout the day here. Year after year, we really see that this networking component to be one of the highlights of the program for participants. We survey, you'll see at the end of each meeting, we hand you a survey and we really do take those and consider them for future meetings. But we see this networking component all meetings mentioned on those surveys. So hopefully you took some time here this morning to get to know the folks in your location. If you haven't, we encourage you to continue to do that throughout the day here. We'll have some time over lunch especially. Certainly there's a wide range of industries and expertise represented in each location. We saw that here in Reedsville this morning. So I encourage you today and in future meetings and interactions to take a few minutes, get to know the other participants in the room. I'm sure you'll find there are folks very similar to you and those that are very different from you in your operation, but we're all here with one ultimate goal to better our financial and business understanding and skills. So make sure to take that opportunity to learn more from each other. Second goal today is to have you as participants understand how to gain the most value from AgBiz Masters. So how to take what you're learning in the modules and the meetings and apply it to yourself and your individual operation. This morning, you're going to get to hear from an AgBiz Masters alumni panel here in Reedsville. Includes 3 AgBiz alumni from past years. And we're excited to hear how they've been able to use concepts and tools that they learned about in AgBiz Masters in real life. So they'll also share tips on how to gain the most value out of the AgBiz Masters program as well. Yeah, you'll also have the opportunity to meet Dr. David Cole here this morning. He's the creator of the module series that we use in the AgBiz Masters program. So you'll become very familiar with Dr. Cole and his work as he leads you through the modules for the next 2 years. And then after lunch, we'll have a special presentation on the 2018 tax law update and how it specifically impacts you as a young and beginning farmer. After the tax law update, year 2 participants are welcome to stay for this presentation and then dismiss themselves for the day. If you feel like you need a brush up on the basics of AgBiz or would just like to continue to hear the presentations through the afternoon, feel free to stay. You don't have to leave by any means. After the tax law update, year 1 participants will hear from Phil Taylor and Leslie Hoover. They're going to spend some time this afternoon helping us better understand the importance of farm accounting. And then we will wrap up our afternoon by providing you with some of the basics about AgBiz Masters so you're familiar with the expectations, things like where your modules are located, the Facebook group, that kind of thing. So beyond the general knowledge learned and networking with other young and beginning farmers, there are some additional benefits of the AgBiz Masters program. So the first one is the business plan. You should have received a binder today, and in the back of the binder is a pretty comprehensive business plan. The program, AgBiz Masters, is really designed to really help you create and build, a business plan out. So you'll notice through the years that this is a significant area of focus and a definite benefit of AgBiz. So as you complete your modules, we encourage you to take time and complete the different sections of that business plan in the back of your binder. Let's see. Another key component that we've already talked about is the networking component of AgBiz. Definite benefit of the program, both in and outside of the meetings here. Previously, we have had participants participate in an online discussion forum. So if you're a year 2 participant, you're familiar with the Ning network that we used last year for the discussion questions. This year, we're trying something out a little bit different. We've created a year 1 and year 2 AgBiz Masters Facebook group. And we did this to kind of help facilitate some additional discussion beyond just those questions. But these pages are really geared towards current AgBiz Masters participants, so year 1 or year 2. And will feature additional content, resources geared towards what you're learning in your modules, as well as reminders, hey, your modules are due, meeting RCP information, things like a thread to post questions that you would like answered in the meetings, and more. So we will post the questions from each module in hope that you as participants engage in the thread discussion, which will be facilitated by AgBiz Masters program facilitators, so the folks that are in your room today, or speakers and program partners as well. So links and instructions on how to create a Facebook if you don't have one, or if you do have one, how to get to those pages can be found on the second flyer in your binder. If you have already requested access to the Facebook groups, great job. I've got several notifications here this morning, about 15 of folks trying to get into the Facebook group, so great. Those groups will actually open up later this week with a review of the kickoff meeting. So you'll get notification that you've been accepted there later this week. So meeting dates, today is the kickoff meeting. Each year, both year 1 and year 2 have a January and March meeting. So today we have both year 1 and year 2 participants together. We'll actually separate you out to learn the pertinent content for each year here for the next 2 years. So the year 1 January meeting is January 17th, and then the March meeting is March 8th, 2019. The year 2 January meeting is January 24th, and the March meeting, which will be the conclusion of the program, will be held March 19th. So save those dates. All meetings are generally held from about 9:30 to 2, but some obviously may vary in time. So as we did with this meeting, we'll always reach out to you to have your RSVP information. So you'll get, if you gave us a mail preference, you would get that via mail. If you chose the email preference, you would get that via email. So keep your eyes out a couple weeks before the meeting dates to get your RSVP information in. So with the meetings, we really encourage you to continue to attend. They really are a great way to add value to the program and what you're learning in your modules. We know that everyone might not be able to make every meeting. The good news is we do record them. So if you're not able to make the meeting, or you're enrolled with a spouse or business partner who may be bear hunting today, you can actually have them watch the meeting later at a later date, as long as you have internet access. So for those who do have internet access, we actually will post that link directly to the Facebook page. We'll email it out, or we actually mail the link out as well with meeting materials if you missed the meeting. So if you ever do miss the meeting, you can go ahead and watch it online and participate that way. So please note, if you're participating via the online modules, I received the emails this morning. They did go out with access to your online modules. So you should have received it about 8:30 this morning. If you did not receive that login information with instructions on the link and how to log in, please let me know ASAP so we can get you up and running here and get you access to complete your modules. So that really is all I had to share this morning. Please feel free to reach out to me at any time if you have any questions or concerns. My contact information is on that bright green sheet. You can't miss it, that first page in your binder there at the bottom. So at any time throughout the program, please feel free to reach out to me. We're excited about another year at AgBiz Masters and really wish you the best, both year 1 and year 2 participants, as you kick off this year again. So I'll stop here to answer any questions. If there are any questions out there, you're welcome to tell your facilitator to just take your conference off mute and ask away. All right, well, it sounds like there's no questions, but if there are at a later date, again, feel free to reach out to me. So we're going to go ahead and move on to our panel today. I have 3 alumni with me in Reedsville. We are very pleased to have David Zimmerman and Marlon and Suzanne Hartzler. They're going to spend some time sharing how AgBiz Masters has influenced them and their operation. So David, Marlon, and Suzanne, thank you for joining us today. We're going to start out with just a brief introduction of you guys, your background, your operation, what year you graduated from AgBiz, and then we'll roll into, I've got some prepared questions, and then we'll have some time with the video conference folks as well, questions there. So David, why don't you start us off? Your background, well, your name, your background, tell us about your family, and what year you graduated from AgBiz.
Hello, my name is David Zimmerman, from Thompsontown, Juniata County. Live on my dad's farm right now with my wife. We got 5 children. Do a feedlot operation, run about 50 head of beef cattle, fattening operation. Farm about 60, 70 acres. We also do some produce, some vegetable crops, mostly sweet corn, pumpkins, strawberries, some other. We have asparagus, stuff like that. Mostly market that myself. We have also in partnership with my dad in a store, Zimmerman's Farm Market, which most of my produce would go down there. We do wholesale some, but biggest thing right now is time restraint. Can't do everything I want to do, and so I really got to be careful how much I really try to do. But in the process of buying the farm here from Dad, that's in the works. Should get completed here this next year. So I'm kind of excited about that. It's always a little bit better it looks a little better if you're in it anyways. So graduated here from AgBiz in 2016. I really enjoyed the program. Really got to see some insight that I was missing before, especially in the finance part, keeping cash flow there. Farm operation is a whole lot much more fun if you have the money there, the cash flow to actually keep it going. If you're always worrying about where your next paycheck's coming, where you're going to pay your next bill, it can really get you down. So, and it's not real great now for the farm industry, but if you do a little bit more management of your cash flow, I think that definitely helps things a lot.
Great. Marlon and Suzanne?
Okay. We're Marlon and Suzanne Hartzler. We have a farm of about 120 acres here in Belleville, Mifflin County. We were in the dairy industry for 11 years. We sold our cows about 3 years ago. I like to refer to ourselves as recovering dairy farmers. The dairy industry is not what we would all like it to be, but that has helped us get us to where we are today. We just put up a hog barn, a finishing barn with Country View Farms, and we will be populating later this week, starting population for that. We're looking forward to that. Between milking cows and pigs, I did some off-farm income. I milked for a neighboring farmer. I raise heifers for another farmer. Get them at breeding age, do the breeding, raise them to almost freshening. So that is part of our farm income. Also do crops, corn and beans mainly, some hay on the side. A little bit about my family. We have 4 children. My wife takes care of them. It's a full-time job. We have 4 children. And yeah, I'm looking forward to being able to stay home and work with the pig barn and work some more there on the farm.
Great, thank you. So we're just going to kick off here with a couple questions. So, Lunmai, in your own words, what does AgBiz Masters teach young and beginning farmers?
As for me, I think it teaches you a lot of the inner workings of your finances. It's not just a checkbook. You just write money out here. It makes you plan for the future. Planning was definitely one of the biggest things I took out of it. How to your business plan. I always thought, what's a business plan and what's the importance of it? Mm-hmm. But after going through the program, there is a lot into a business plan. But you have something down on paper. It's a whole lot better than having something just in your head. And it might seem to be a little hard to actually put it together, but once you're done, it's a very great thing to have.
David, did you have a business plan before you started AgBiz?
I did not. No.
Okay. And did you have a completed business plan when you graduated?
I did.
Great. That is
one of those things I really wanted to get done.
Yeah.
Not easy to do.
Yeah.
At least not for me. I didn't think it was. But it's nice to have a complete business plan.
Sure. Did you complete it in sections throughout the program, or like complete your module and then complete that section of the business plan, or did you do it all at once?
No. As we went down through, my favorite part of the business plan would be doing the income statements and all those. And being I like playing with tech a little bit. Went through and hooked all my Excel sheets together so I can. That's just something I thought was a lot of fun. You can put your information in one or two places, it spits it out all different other places, and can do my benchmarking and all at one time. So
Great.
I really enjoyed that part. But the hardest part was really getting your some of your missions and stuff. Actually, what are you really accomplishing? And but we got through that.
Good. And do you feel better now that that's on paper?
Oh, definitely.
Oh, definitely.
I mean, sometimes you get busy. You're very busy, and you figure after you come back and really, what am I doing here? You can look at your plan like, okay, it's good to revisit every now and then. You can actually see exactly what your long-term goals are, what actually you are really working for. If you don't really have your plan down, and it don't seem to be making a lot of money, sometimes you really want to what you're doing. So if you're ever depressed about something, you come back and you can, you know what, this is really the clouds will break here, will quit raining here eventually, and the sun will shine again. So it helps in that part.
Great. Thank you. Marlon and Suzanne, in your own words, what do you think AgBiz Masters teaches young and beginning farmers?
It's interesting how you can all go through the same thing and take different things away from it. The thing that it taught us is that numbers don't lie. Sometimes you wish they would, but they don't. If something isn't working, don't be afraid to change it. That was one thing we had to learn with the dairy. It teaches you to read numbers, to know what those numbers mean and how numbers define your business. And the one thing that it taught us, maybe I'm jumping ahead here, the one thing it taught us is the importance of keeping records. If you don't keep records, you don't know what you did. Because if you think you'll remember, you don't. You have to keep records, and then you can look back and see what I did and did it work, and you can learn from that. Records is, at least for us, that's how it felt. Like we did not keep records the way we should have, and I'm not saying we do 100% now, but it's much better than it was. And if you don't have records, you don't know what you need to change. And I think that was one thing that it should teach us.
Sure. Great. What did you enjoy the most about being part of AgBiz?
Well, I really enjoyed the meetings, interacting with your peers. Just something about these meetings. Everybody's in the same shoes. Everybody's trying to make it go in the ag industry, and that I really enjoyed that part of it. So, like I said, like she said before, the more you get to know each other, the more fun it is, and by the end of your meetings, by the end of the year, you act like you can have a bond, know different people you didn't know before, and so that was, for me, that was one of my favorite aspects of it.
For us, yeah, I would say the same thing. Getting to know other people and sharing experiences and getting to talk to each other, and that goes beyond AgBiz. It's surprising how you keep in touch after AgBiz. We graduated in 2013, and so you keep in touch with those people somewhat. David Cole was a highlight of our AgBiz program. We enjoyed those talks very much. None of us like to do meetings like this, at least I don't. I mean, most of us would have all rather stayed home today than show up at something like this. But do it because you're glad you do. And it does pay off. It does help in your business, and adds variety.
Certainly. What principles learned in AgBiz Masters have you really been able to apply in your operation? David, I know you touched on the business plan and record keeping for you guys as well.
One of the things that I use now more than ever that we never did before was a cash flow statement. That's one of the, to me, is very critical. This takes a lot of stress off you. If you know about what you're going to have coming in and what's coming up, but you don't have to swing it at the last minute. You get a surprise. I mean, you still get surprises, but you can at least format up ahead a little bit what's going to happen. To me, that's one thing I've really learned, and benchmarking too. I really like to use that a lot to know where I'm at financially. It just it's part of the stuff that I like, which is definitely different than a lot of other people. But I do like the accounting part of the whole aspect.
David, did you have accounting experience before AgBiz, or did you learn those key concepts in?
I had somewhat of accounting before, but not in the detail that I do now.
Okay.
My dad always was somewhat of an accountant, so always ever since I was paying taxes, I always did it myself, something, and that gets you into some of it, not everything, but I always have my dad to ask, what do you do here, This is a different, what for form you got to fill out, especially for taxes. Rules are always changing, and so I have had a little bit of a leg up on a lot of people. I had someone I could just ask questions and learn it, but the aspect of the real accounting, I really didn't do,
Sure.
QuickBooks is one thing, but it only does so much, so.
Great. Harlan and Suzanne, principles that you learned in AgBiz Masters that you've been able to apply in your operations?
And I touched on this a little bit before, is the thing of we as ag people, we do the same thing. Or you have a seasonal, you have things year after year, you do the same things, and being able to keep records helps you know what to do next year and what not to do, and to be able to look at what you have done and what worked, what you have done that didn't work, and come up with a solution for that problem, and I don't know if that answers the question or not, but being able to look back and learn from your mistakes and from your success,
Sure.
and to move forward and hopefully eliminate those mistakes.
Mm-hmm. Sure, and you use record keeping and all of that to help identify some of those mistakes or, great experiences.
Right.
And help you make those decisions.
Right. And I don't like accounting, so that got pushed back. So that's where him and I differ.
Sure. So when you were starting or joining your business, how would you have ranked the importance of production, finance, and business management? So rank them 1, 2, and 3, 1 being the most important.
Well, probably before I did AgBiz Masters, production was probably number 1.
Sure.
I mean, you don't have nothing to sell, you don't make money, you know.
Sure.
So yeah, you can put everything into production and forget everything else, but it really can turn around to bite you later on. So now I actually put production about last.
Oh, great.
After when I went through AgBiz, finances, one of the, I'd say more important, I forget what you said. What was it?
Finance, business management, and production.
Business management, I would say, is number one. Well,
Okay.
close to that would be finance, would be
Okay.
number two. But I would have sort of had them all backwards before.
Sure.
Production is still important, but without good management, production really, I think, doesn't make that much if you don't have the management to back it up. And I think everybody, you could have it in different orders and still be all right. That's just the way I would rate it.
Sure.
That's very interesting because I would have said the exact same thing. As production was, well, you have to make more product. You have to be more, you have to get more out. But it's really not. I sort of lump finance and business management together in saying that they would definitely be number one. If you can't manage your product, what good is your product? So yeah, I would echo what he said 100%. And if you do have good business management, that will overflow into making product. So if you manage your finances, you will also be managing your or your production. So yeah, I would say that's very, very much the same.
Good. On the same page.
Yeah.
What advice or tips do you have for current participants of AgBiz Masters related to modules, meetings, and life in general?
Well, I don't have a lot of advice, but make it a priority to attend all your meetings. Meetings take time out of your busy schedule, but very important. I had never missed a meeting, and I think it's very critical not to miss meetings if you can at least help it. That really.
You get paid to say that?
We did not. No, we didn't even. We gave them the questions ahead of time, but I didn't even coordinate their answers.
But I guess maybe I like meetings. I like going to other ag choice meetings, to hear just the what's going on in the industry and stuff like that. But some people, meetings just a meeting. I think meetings can be very important to help you stay focused what you're doing here. Another thing is to participate in your books. It's easy to come home and try to get my chores done now. You throw it on the shelf, and 2 months later, we got a meeting next week. Quick dust this thing off and look at it, and quick, you can quick fill it in, and maybe you'll get it right, and you're all good. But really, what did you learn then? Take some time out of your schedule and go through it, and some of those things that really make you think, the studying on it, the more effort you put into it, the more you get out of it. If you just really don't pay a lot of attention to it, at the end of the year, you'll feel like it wasn't money well spent, and you might not do next year. The more you put into it, definitely the more you'll get out of it.
My wife told me to say this, so it's partly my fault that she said this, but her advice is don't wait till the night before the meeting to do your modules. That happened in our place more than once, and that's probably my fault. But like he said, the more you put into it, the more you get out of it. And sometimes the more you digest some of this stuff, the more you get out of it. So yeah, put yourself into it. And that was the other thing that I struggled with is don't be scared to put yourself in that scenario. It's not comfortable sometimes to open up books and say, this is where we are. How can we change things? But that you'll get way more out of it if you do that. Put your own business into, apply it to the module, and it's surprising the the blind spots that it brings out.
Well, thank you, David and Marlon and Suzanne, for those comments. Really, we did not pay them. Those comments they're genuine, honest advice, and I would agree and echo what they've said, that the more you put into it, definitely the more you get out of the program. And even, Marlon, your suggestion to put yourself in that scenario, we do encourage you. We do case studies in these meetings, and although, we try to accommodate all industries, sometimes, they might just be one that doesn't quite fit you, but we encourage you, do the case study and then take it home and really work your operation into that. We've done an income statement in class, go home and do it for your business as well, for your business plan. So really, we encourage you to participate even outside of these meetings and things as well. And we always have blank case studies and additional resources too, that if you're interested, we can help you with. So, but we do have some time here for questions. So we encourage questions from the audience here. Hopefully you've been thinking as David, Marlon, and Suzanne have been talking. So with that, we'll open it up to the floor. Questions from anyone out there? Just have your facilitator take your video conference off mute and ask away.
Hey, we got one here in Mount Joy.
Okay, go ahead.
This is directed for David. You talked a lot about what you planned and your business plan. How did you plan other than your business plan, and what did you plan, basically?
Well, you mean before I put the business plan together, or how I put it together?
So let's assume that you have your business plan. So what's the next step in your planning?
Well, dig it out every now and then, look at it. As things change, you can make some changes. Like right now, we are going through changes of buying the farm, things like that. So that does throw a whole new dimension in there. Really changes everything. So you almost got to go through. But once you have the first one there, it's a whole lot easier.
David, what did you use before your business plan?
Well, everybody has a business plan in their head to a certain extent. And that's sort of how it was, you know what you want to do, and you just sort of go at it blindly.
Did you find that there was disconnect or miscommunication because you didn't have
definitely.
a clear plan in front of you?
Oh yeah, I mean, you see your plan pretty clearly. You always do. And you think everybody else should too, and they have no idea what's in your head. And it causes a lot of issues. I mean, and communication too, if you're in partnership, is definitely a very much of a very, very vital to have very good communication, because people do think different things. I mean, they can interpretate you too at different.
Sure. And both ways might be even right.
Right.
Just getting on that same page with the way that you're going to go.
Right.
Great. Any other questions?
You mentioned.
Hi, this is Sarah. I'm in Frederick. I was just wondering if you could share the biggest impact, like what area the biggest impact of the program was. Was it that you started making more money, you have more time with your family, your team works better together? Like what area really was changed and improved by, I guess, from before versus after doing this work?
Well, as for me, my cash flow improved. I always had the mentality, pay off your debt as fast as you can. Just tighten your belt, make it happen. Well, eventually you just about suffocate yourself. You might be gaining equity, but you don't have the cash there. And then that just starts pulling you down. It's like a downward spiral to me. So that's one of my biggest takeaways is make sure you keep a good cash flow there. So you don't, even cash flow is just very important. Dr. Poole would tell you cash is king, and that's one of my most important things that I took out from the meeting.
I would say work smarter, not harder. Because if you're doing something that's not working, I don't care how hard you work at it, it's still not going to work. So be informed about what you're doing, and if it's working or not working. Go ahead.
All right, I'm Josh Bruno up here at the Seven Valleys Mid-Atlantic office. I'm from Whitehall, Maryland. So I would like to ask you if you could give some input on this question I'm going to ask. If you could gear it towards a beginning, so somebody just jumping into this. And so with the business plan, how would you say it's best to plan for the unexpected, especially when you're just starting out? So the plan is obviously for you to have something to fall back on, but I've made just about every mistake you could the last couple of years being in this with finances and different things. And the other thing I've learned is that no matter how hard you try to plan with farming, it really doesn't go along to your plan. So with it, how does this fit into the unexpected? How do you plan for when the crops don't turn out or whatever? How does this help you? Guess that was kind of loaded.
Well, as for me, you get back to that cash flow again. Make sure you have some cash reserves to take out some of those bumps there. Cash reserves, I think, is one of those things. It's very hard to do when you're starting out. To have some cash reserve, but for me personally, I think it's pretty important to have some reserve on hand. It's really hard to actually plan for unforeseen things, because if you would have thought about them, you would have put them down. So, but you got to leave some room for error there, and that's where I think cash reserves come in as pretty fairly important to have on hand.
Okay.
I would echo what he said. One thing I would add to that is work with your lender. Don't be scared of your lender. Have a working relationship with them. That's what they're there for. Don't just go to them when you have a problem. Be in contact with them in the good times as well. That way that meeting isn't quite as awkward when you do have a problem.
We had a question here in Reedsville.
In the business plan, you might have mentioned that there's a mission statement. Is that difficult to come up with a mission statement?
Not really difficult, but it makes you really think of, what exactly are you doing? Just for me, just makes you step back a little bit and think, what are you actually farming for? What are you just out to have is it a lifestyle? Is it just to make a lot of money? Are you doing this for fun? Are you doing this? It gets all your priorities more so in line when you sit back, and to me, numbers don't lie. So I'd rather play with numbers. I know how numbers work. Some of the other stuff for me just ain't quite as easy. Some mission statement might be the easiest for some other people, but for me, I'd just rather do the income statement, cash flow statements, things like that. I'm wired that way, but.
I don't know that we actually have a mission statement per se. I would say that a mission statement is most important if you're in a partnership or where you're working with other people, because that puts you all in the same. You're all working towards the same goal, and that's one thing I would that I wanted to say to people starting out in business is employees. Sometimes we think we can't afford a good employee. And if you think you can't afford a good employee, try affording a bad one. You'll find out a good one is cheaper. Especially in a small business where you may only have one employee or two employees, where they have more responsibility than they would in a big business. It pays to have good help.
Great, we have time for another question or two.
Hi, Caleb. This is Heather in Chambersburg. I wanted to know, and this kind of fits right in with the last statement, how taking AgBiz has affected your communication with either your family members or your business partners.
Well, as for business partners, it's usually just me and my dad. We try to have our formal meetings, but a lot of time is, passing meetings or passing, but it is very important to have very good communication with them. And it has definitely helped. With my wife is not so much involved in some of the management parts, but it helps me to try to keep her informed on a lot of that kind of stuff too, because her input still does matter too. So while we're still somewhat of a family business, or we are a family business, that is when you have sometimes the most breakdown in communication. Everybody just thinks everybody should know, and they don't. So it is a struggle, though, to keep everybody informed because you're family. Formal meetings just don't really seem to happen. You got to take an extra step to have a meeting, and so we really try to work on that. And that's one thing I learned that is very important from AgBiz Masters.
Yeah, I would echo that. And sometimes it makes it hard because it is family. Sometimes you need to come to the meeting as business partners and not as family. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but it's tough to balance the relationship with the family relationship with the business relationship, because sometimes it doesn't feel right. But communication takes care of a lot of those problems. And don't just have a meeting, once a month. If you're working together every day, you can talk about it besides at the meeting. Keep communication open. We work together very closely on management decisions and stuff, and that takes time. That's the other thing. It takes time to communicate. It takes time to keep everybody on the same page. But you feel better about yourself and about your business to take time to communicate and make sure everyone is pulling in the same direction.
We have time for one more question.
This is Jen at the York location. My question was, you guys both mentioned how important record keeping was for your operations. Could you maybe suggest or what worked for you as far as a program or a method for keeping records, and which was kind of better for you?
Sometimes when you're doing record keeping, just a pen and a paper works. Like he had mentioned, you think you're going to remember them and you don't. I keep mostly electronic records, and I'm going to get it tonight, and while I'm tired, next day I'll remember it, do it tomorrow. And next thing you know, it's a week or 2 weeks later, and I forgot totally what it was. So sometimes just scribbling your notes down and doing it later, but write it down. Make sure you have a hard copy of it right away. And record keeping is very important. I like to keep records of just about everything, but it gets to a time where you really get busy. You think record keeping is one of the things you can just cut out. You don't have time for it, or you just don't have something on hand to do that, and that's a mistake. Take time to keep your records.
Let's see if she'll take one more question.
Simplest way for me to keep records is tell my wife. For myself, I don't necessarily enjoy keeping records, but like he said, just take the time to write it down somewhere. That's not best because you need to put them in such a way that you can get to them, and if you have a random statement written on a piece of paper, that's not a good record, but it's better than nothing. Take time to write it down and put it in a file it in such a manner that you can go back and make sense of what you put down, and that's what records are. It's something you can go back and we don't use a program or anything as such. I'm sure there's nothing wrong. There's good programs out there and such, but it's different for everybody. And simply, as long as you put it down somewhere that you can go back and know what you meant by what you wrote, that's a good record, I guess.
Yes, it is. Well, great.
All right. If you would have one more chance here for a question, could you just give a description on what kind of records you're referring to? Is this strictly production records for your operation, or could you just give a couple examples of maybe different kinds of records you keep that help you?
Well, you got to keep spray records. You got to do that for, it's by law, you got to keep spray records. Number two, you got to keep spray records for yourself, so you know what you did, your production. What you went into your field before with. So you need them for the state needs. They don't need to see them, but they want. You got to have them for the state. You should have them for yourself. You got production records then. Your yield records. There is just about, you can keep records for anything. For beef cattle, your records of what you bought, paid for, your price per pound, when you bought them, what your daily rate of gain is on all of them, your sell weights. It seems sometimes you get consumed by always keeping records, but it's really nice to go back, a year, see what your rate of gain was for your operation here a year ago. See what your yields were. If you don't keep records, you really can't do a real cost production if you don't even know what your production is. But it does a lot more than just production records. You got your spray records, and financial records. Another big one. It seems pretty much everything there's some record to keep tabs on.
For myself, a big thing for me is keeping records in my heifer breeding program. Keep records of like when you had a sick animal, when you see a sick animal and you treated them, what did you treat them with? How did they respond to it? Then you can go back and see, is this a chronic problem that this heifer has a history? The other thing is feed inventory records is one thing that I like to keep track of. How much feed have I used so far? And to date from last year, how's it trending? Is my feed going to hold out till next spring? And just little things like that if you it helps you know where you're at production wise. That's where I was coming from.
Well, thank you, Marlon, Suzanne, and David. We certainly appreciate your willingness to come share your AgBiz Masters experience with us and how it's really affected you and your operation. So participants, hopefully you better understand how to gain the most value from AgBiz this year and how to take what you're learning and apply it to yourself and your individual operation. Can we get a round of applause for our alumni panel? These really are great times spent with our alumni, and we certainly do appreciate it. You'll notice throughout the program, almost every meeting features a graduate of the program who will spend time talking through a key concept or concepts learned in AgBiz and how it's influenced them in their operation. So we look forward to more alumni participation in the January and March meetings. Okay, it looks like Dr. Cole and Alicia have joined us. Dr. Cole, are you good to go? You can hear us okay?
Oh, yeah. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. That's great.
Okay.
So we are pleased to have Dr. David Cole with us this morning. For more than 2 decades, he worked in the classroom on the Virginia Tech campus as a professor of agricultural finance and small business management and entrepreneurship in the Department of Agriculture and Applied Economics. He retired from teaching in 2003. Now, as Professor Emeritus, he has traveled 8 million miles, hosting more than 6,000 workshops and seminars for various agricultural groups, has published 4 books and 1,200 articles on financial and business-related topics in various publications. I'm sure that those numbers are outdated at this point as well. Throughout his career, he's received 11 major teaching awards and is a 2-time recipient of the American Agriculture Economics Association Outstanding Teaching Award. He is also one of the top-rated instructors in agricultural finance and banking, training more than 1,000 lenders using an online and face-to-face educational approach. Dr. Cole is the writer and creator of the online module series that we use in the AgBiz Masters program. As I'm sure our year two participants can attest, Dr. Cole does a great job sharing his personal involvement with agriculture and years of experience in the industry to make learning the material on AgBiz both interesting and engaging. So Dr. Cole, thank you for joining us again today to kick off our AgBiz Masters program this year. We'll hand it over to you.
Okay, well, hey, thanks so much, and it's a pleasure. We're coming from Blacksburg, Virginia. The temperature down here is going to be about 55, 60 today, and so it's a nice day down here in Blacksburg. First of all, I give an A+ to the panel this morning, and they did an excellent job. Actually, I'm actually going to be writing an article based off the panel there this morning because there was a lot of salient points and perspectives there. Here's what I'd like to do with today's talk. I would like to lecture probably for about 40-45 minutes, and then what I'm going to do is give you 5 to 7 minutes to come up with some questions for me. And of course, my associate here, Alicia Morris, she'll help me, and what we'll do is we'll take your questions, and then hopefully we'll get you right up on time for lunch. And so one of the things that I like to do is make sure this is very engaging and very interactive. And so let's kick it off. The title is Managing for Success in an Ever-Changing Environment. And I think that's the understatement. I'm just coming off the National Agricultural Bankers Conference in Omaha, Nebraska, and I can just tell you 2019 is going to be interesting, but boy, the decade of the 2020s is going to be extremely interesting, and it's going to be set up particularly for young and beginning agriculture producers, because there's going to be a lot of changes, which I'll talk about here today, that are going to be influencing your business plans and how you apply your business plans. So let's just start right out with our PowerPoint here this morning and talk a little bit the low beam. I'll go low beam and then I'll go high beam as we look at 2020 to 2030. I would have to tell you right up front, regardless of the enterprises in this room or in all the locations, the 13 locations, international trade is the 800-pound gorilla. Because why is that? Because 1 out of every $5 of net farm income is generated through international trade. And while you say, I produce for the local markets, you're influenced by the international trade type of situations. And here's what I find. We are seeing the trade agreements being negotiated. We now have the USMCA, which is Mexico, United States, and Canada. That agreement has come to fruition. Why is that agreement important? Because our #1 trading partner is Canada to the north. Mexico is actually our #3 trading partner in agriculture, over $40 billion worth of sales. And so one of the things that's impacted us is this, and again, I'm not going to get political on this, I'll give both sides of this, but did the trade agreements, the NAFTA agreement, need to be looked at? Yeah. Did they need to be torn up? No. And to any of the dairy farmers that are in any of these locations in here, it'll cost you $2 a hundredweight per milk. I'll tell you why. Because we export about 1 in 7 days of milk outside the United States. 39% of it goes to Mexico. When we threatened to tear up NAFTA, the Mexicans basically went to Europe, who had given up their milk quotas about 18 months prior to that announcement. And of course, we, the United States and Europe, put sanctions on Russia. So all that milk out of Europe and cheese that was going to Russia, guess what? It didn't have a home. So the Mexicans actually found another home for their imported milk. The other thing that's really influencing us right now, whether it's beef, poultry, hog, is we still have tariffs on steel and machinery with Mexico. And that is impacting us because we have counter tariffs on our agricultural products. The key thing that's going to be very, very important is we've closed this agreement, but now we have a new leader of the House of Representatives. And those agreements are going to be voted upon in 2019. As you go through this class and have subsequent meetings, that's going to be very, very important to watch. Now, this administration, what they're doing is they're piecemealing international trade. They got Mexico and Canada together. Now they're negotiating with Europe and Japan. And if they get those together, then they'll come back and negotiate with China. And of course, China is definitely the 800-pound gorilla. And our tariffs on China right now is costing their economy about 0.7% growth. Actually, what we're seeing, and you all need to be aware of this, and it was talked about at the conference, we're seeing a slowdown of the global economy. China, Europe, actually Japan went into negative growth. We got to watch that real closely because, again, the tariffs and the international trade risks are kind of creating uncertainty in investment throughout the world economy. The one thing that all of us need to look at, and I say all of us because I myself am involved in the dairy industry, we have a dairy creamery, I'm watching real closely China's Belt and Road Initiative. And that was analogous to our Marshall Plan after World War II, where we reconstructed Europe and Asia. And that benefited the United States by giving us an accelerated standard of living in the 50s and the 60s. We made about $120 billion of investment in today's terms. China, in their Belt and Road Initiative, has already invested $156 billion in 68 countries. They've earmarked $1 trillion. Why is that important to all of us on this video cast? Because they're making investments in Brazil and Argentina, in Oceania, Australia, and New Zealand, also in Eastern Europe. Those are potential competitors to us, and they're making investment in the infrastructure. And so we'll have to watch that real closely. And to any of the beef farmers that are in here, Argentina is going to increase their beef herd 4 times. Why? They have dropped tariffs. The new leader of Argentina has decided to drop all agricultural tariffs, soybeans, corn, and beef. And so one of the things is this Belt and Road Initiative into China, but also into Europe, is going to be one to very closely watch as far as competitiveness of U.S. agriculture to the rest of the world. A couple of other things that I'm observing. The great bridge right now is land. As a couple of the panelists mentioned, agriculture is going through a rough patch. Matter of fact, we're about 6 years into an economic reset. That creates opportunity for young and beginning farmers like yourself. The thing that's creating a situation where we haven't had a crash in agriculture has been our farm real estate values, because it gives owners of land the opportunity to refinance, to restructure the debt. And so I call that the Great Bridge. I mentioned the Great Wall of Protein. We're We're putting up a lot of hog and poultry facilities. Of course, you see the great wall of protein in the dairy industry, and we're going to have to monitor that real closely. And the grain industry will have to monitor it real closely, because to have a healthy grain industry, you got to have a healthy livestock industry, and a lot of people, overlook that factor. I'll tell you, two headwinds in agriculture right now is we're in an environment of increasing interest rates, but as the United States increases their interest rates, it makes the dollar stronger, and that prohibits the ability to export. So we've got two headwinds. It's not only the interest rate increases, but it's the dollar increase. So we export pork, which a lot of pork is exported. We export poultry, we export dairy, grain. One of the things is it makes our product more expensive overseas. You will notice on my PowerPoint, debt is the Achilles heel. We got almost $21 trillion worth of debt here in this country. China is debt-ridden, and one of the things is as interest rates increase, of course, the cost to service that debt could potentially be Achilles heel. We'll have to watch that real closely. You know, as young and beginning farmers, and it's also a privilege to be able to do this program with you. We've had almost 1,000 participants in this program in many areas of the country. Young farmers like yourself, you know what the big question you'll ask me? Should I purchase real estate? Well, here's your facts, folks. Farm real estate since 1910 has increased almost 80% of the time. And if you go from the start of World War II to 2017, it's appreciated 88% of the time. But our forefathers, they were reluctant to borrow money to buy real estate because from 1910 up to World War II, it only increased 57% of the time. Actually, in the 1920s, farm real estate was down for 13 years while the general economy was doing well. And that's something I also want you to remember. When the general economy does well, ag economy tends to be struggling economically. When the ag and rural economy are doing well, then the general economy tends to be in a recession. So it's counter-cyclical. Now, farm real estate, and I'm sure some of you have heard about the farm crisis of the 1980s, it was actually down for only 4 years, but it was down 50%, and that was a big drop. Now, for the footprint where you're all in, it probably came off about 20%, but there's one key thing I want you to remember. It goes back to our panelists, and boy, that was a privilege listening to the panel this morning. If you ever buy real estate, make sure you keep some extra cash around, because what happens is you still want to be able to make those payments in a down economic cycle. How much cash? I'm just going to throw this one out. You like to take your working capital. You like to see at least 20% of your net working capital in cash, okay? Now, that's a principle I'm going to give you today. And as you go through subsequent workshops this winter, talk about the principle of cash. Now, a lot of your mothers and fathers are going to say, well, that cash is not earning me anything in the bank. The key on cash is it's there so you can capitalize on opportunities. That is your return on the investment. So don't take the short view on cash. Now, a couple of other things. The U.S. economy. U.S. economy right now is 112 months in economic growth. Let's put that in perspective. In the 1980s, it was 106 months. 1990s, 120 months. If we go another 8 months without a recession, this will be the all-time record. Now, what that's doing, though, is it is increasing our interest rates. But I will have to tell you, while our urban and counterparts, it appears like they're doing well, a lot of them are living off credit cards, and a lot of them are living off appreciation in the stock market and their real estate. Their homes are going up in value. Their stocks are going up in value. So two things you're going to have to watch real closely. And if I'm in that footprint that you're all in here, where a third of the population of the United States that has money is in your back door, watch two things. Watch the stock market and also watch housing real estate. Because here's what's happening. Every time a stock goes up in $1 in value, they spend 4 cents more. So they'll come out to your farmer's market. They'll come out for agritourism. Every time real estate goes up $1 in value, you spend 9 cents more. There's 3 things you got to watch out on this consumer. Stocks, real estate, what their home values, and gas prices. When gas prices go up, they close their pocketbooks up. Gas prices go down, they open their pocketbook up. And again, gas prices shouldn't change too much because North America, think about this. United States is the #1 energy producer in the world now. Canada's #6. Mexico is #8. That's good for the consumer, but it's good for you because 8 out of every $10 you spend. Remember, he talked about doing the cash flow. One of the things that can really alter your cash flow is have a spike in energy prices because the 3 major producers are here on the North American continent. I really don't see gas prices spiking like they have in the past. And usually that is the killer of the economic expansion. On interest rates, boy, I will tell you this. Even in our business, one of the things that's the most important statement you can do for your business plan is the cash flow plan. Let me talk about this. Because as you do your cash flow plan, it's 80% of the business plan. Because you got to think of production, finance, marketing, business management. And it talks about when your income comes in, your costs come in and out. So if you could just do one thing in this AgBiz planner, that cash flow statement will be 80% of your business plan. And again, as the gentleman asked, he made a very, very good question. He says, well, how do you plan for uncertainty? I had this gentleman in North Carolina. If you could picture a bulldog, this guy would look like a bulldog, and he had a son and daughter involved in the business. And he goes, oh, you can't plan do a cash flow plan because you never know when a hurricane's going to hit. Of course, he was slamming President Trump and all that. And I go to him, Stuart, why don't you do scenario planning? Do your spreadsheet and change your costs and your prices. And he goes, well, I don't know how to do it. I says, well, have your son and daughter do it. And he goes, well, I don't want them to see the finances yet. Well, to be very candid with you, I looked at Stuart and I says, and this was a family business. I says, you'll be the last generation operating this business. Now, that's the story. Here's the rest of the story. I saw Stuart last year, and guess what? He's turned his cash flow and his finance over to his son and daughter, and he says, that stuff really does kind of work. And so it's one of those things that's important. But here's what you need to put in your cash flow plan. You go borrow money, it's on a variable interest rate. You're probably going to see 3 interest rate increases. I'm a little hesitant there. It might be 2, it might be 3, and it depends on what happens this next month in December. But the interest rate increases will be 0.25% at a time. So write that one down. You're borrowing money, and by the way, you're borrowing money from farm credits on variable rate or a bank. You're probably going to, anticipate probably 0.5 to 0.75% interest rate. And I want to make a little point. Some of you are saying, well, I'm going to borrow from the bank of mom and dad or grandpa and grandma. You know what I highly recommend for young and beginning farmers? You borrow from Farm Credit or you borrow from FSA or a bank. Why? Because you have to be held accountable to someone else. I hope you all heard that one. And boy, that is a common mistake made in finances. So again, what do you keep your eye on? If you see unemployment where it is or in the low 4%, if you hear this economy is growing at 3%, or if you hear inflation's picking up, and by the way, last week, wage inflation's up, and also trucking inflation is up because of electronic logs and the baby boomer trucker. They just said, we're out of here. So oftentimes you can't get product shipped out there, and it's creating inflationary costs along with our tariffs. It is creating inflation in our economy. So that's your interest rates, but apply it back to your cash flow and one of your assignments in the AgBiz planner. Now, let's put the high beams on. And don't shoot the messenger. I wore a white shirt. I'm blending into the white background here, so I'm kind of like a ghost in the shadow. But there's going to be some trends that are going to impact you from 2020 to 2030 if they aren't already. And it's going to be the millennials, Gen Z, and Gen A. That'll be the generation that's in grade school now, and the baby boomers. And here's what's happening. Everybody's watching their health. And a couple of things. I'm involved with the dairy industry. 5 years ago, we didn't hear about what? Almond milk, soya milk, etc., etc. 3 years ago, we didn't hear anything about cultured meat. Now it's one of those things that people are talking about. One of the things that I would just tell you is our industries are going to be really, really challenged, but it also opportunity, because there's going to be other non-beef products or dairy products coming into the marketplace. Vegans. 1 in 10 Germans now is a vegan. 6% of Americans are vegan. I had a guy, a young student from one of the West Coast universities in my seminar in Pasco, Kennewick, Washington. He indicated that up to a quarter of his friends are now vegans. And you know what the premise is? It's the environmental footprint. I don't shoot the messenger because Alicia will tell you, I like my Five Guys burgers. We go to Wendy's and everything. But again, these are going to be things that are going to influence the marketplace. But your success is going to be alignment of 3 things. Your resources, your land, labor, capital, and information, with your talents, with the marketplace. And the footprint most of you are in, I see a big growth of niche markets. And one of the things is this younger generation, they look for experiences and personalization. And we've seen nothing yet. Also, we're starting to see the transformation on technology. And there's 2 methods. You can go high tech, or you can go low tech, and you can still be successful. I'll just give you the low tech. I've got some young farmers like yourself. They'll go back to the old 4020 John Deere, the old Case or the old International tractors. And one of the things is they kind of hit the low cost. They're good at mechanics. And one of the things is they're very successful. I've seen others go to robots. I've seen them doing GPS and various things. They have been very successful as well. So it's not one size that fits all. But what's going to impact this is going to be called blockchain technology. And I'm sounding like I'm out in outer space, but it links the consumer and the consumer desires to the food companies back to the producers. For example, Amazon spoke just after me at the national conference last week. When they bought Whole Foods out, folks, that changed all of our grocery markets. Kroger, Wegmans, Earth Fare, all of the stores have changed. And so data, it was interesting. The lady from Land O'Lakes, who was the CEO, she talked about her new hires. 75% of her new hires are statisticians because they're going in and analyzing consumer trends and data so that then they can, Land O'Lakes, bring that right back to their farm producers and basically say, this is what the consumer wants. So this is very exciting. It's going to be challenging out here, but it's also very exciting. Couple of other things. Watch big agriculture. We've had 2 significant lawsuits. Monsanto, over a $200 million lawsuit in California, and also Smithfield Foods, $487 million lawsuit. And it's basically the class action lawyers are going out and getting the public to come back and come after large agriculture. And one of the things is NGOs or non-government organizations, and where you're close to population, they're going to be more powerful than any government regulation out there. And so antibiotic-free, open pen, biosecurity, all of these elements are going to be things that are going to be in your vocabulary. And by the way, it creates opportunity. We just think this is a nuisance out here. If you position well, it creates opportunity. So NGOs are going to be a big trend. And then technology and the consumer. And one of the things it's going to require is you've got to analyze data, but you got to critically think about the data and you got to communicate. Now, let's come back to our panel. Think about everything that they said this morning. What did they do? They often kept it in their head. But going through the course, it helped them analyze the data, critically think about that data, and then communicate it, whether it's the lender or whether it's a family member, husband and wife, etc., etc. So technology is going to be very, very important. And all I want you to do in discussion questions, say you have peer discussion questions. One of them is, I want you to think about the beer market and how the beer market's changed in the past 5 years. It used to be what? Anheuser-Busch, Coors, Molson. Now, the consumption of those brews are down 19%, and the craft beers are taking over. For many segments of agriculture, it's going to be craft beer. And think about this, and I'm stimulating some of your thoughts, but this can represent a lot of opportunity. I'll just give you an example of our creamery. We've started offering A2A2 milk, okay, for lactose intolerant. And our whole theme is welcome back to the dairy case to all those people that went to almond and soya milk. And it's just one of those things, we take a challenge, but then we come with a counter strategy. Can I tell you another little one? We sell ice cream. Matter of fact, I was at the dentist office this morning. I had 3 cavities because I'm eating too much of our ice cream, okay? But the dentist office was all talking about our ice cream. And what we did a couple of years ago, instead of offering just ice cream in quarts or a half-gallon or 2-gallon tubs, we started offering little 4-ouncers. And it's kicked off like wildfire. And you know what our theme is? Just enough, but not too much. And again, you have to be quick and nimble in this marketplace. And sometimes that's where some of the bigger agricultures kind of drop the ball. One final trend that I see coming at you is this. The decade of the 2020s is going to be the decade of transition. Think about our 2 panelists. They're agro-entrepreneurs. They were multitaskers. Some of you are going to be in large, complex businesses. It's going to be cousins managing with cousins. What's going to be interesting in that situation, this Ag Business Planner is going to be real important for you. You know why? Because you're going to have to ask the cousins some tough questions. You're going to have to ask uncles and aunts some very tough questions. And they're going to say, well, where are you coming up with these questions? Well, we're doing it through the AgBiz Planner, so you can blame the AgBiz Planner. But the larger your business is and the more complex they become, one of the things that you're going to find is, this business planning is very important. What did our panelists say? It's because of communication. Also see many more women in farming, ranching, ag lending. And again, ag lending, the mythical is going to become typical. In other words, think about this. You think about opportunity. I'm going to give you a little spark. 21% of American farmers and ranchers have no next generation to come back. Talk about opportunity again. So I'm very excited about the decade of the 2020s because you're going to be in the decade of the transition. Now, let's go farm economics. This is FinBin data out of the University of Minnesota. It covers up to 22 states, 8,000 farms, and it's really good information. Did you hear our panelists talk about benchmarking? This is the type of data that you benchmark yourself to. Now, what's real interesting in this data, the period 2007 to 2012, one of the things is this was a super cycle. People made more money in that 5-year window than they did over a 40-year period. That cycle's only occurred 3 other times since 1910. So, for all the people that you hear waiting for this, prices to come back, I'm going to tell you for a fact that you're going to see more and more of the economics of 2013 through 2017, 2018 is going to play out. But here is the kicker. The old normal is the new normal. And if you look at net farm income, 2017 to 2012 averaged 125,000. I've rounded these numbers up. 2001 to 2005 it was 54. 1996 to 2001 was 50,000. Again, we had pre-economic super cycle, the super cycle, and then we had a bunch of Asian countries that just boosted demand for our commodities. The average net, or the median net profit, 2013, 2017 is 35,000. But here's your kicker. I want everybody to pay attention. I don't want you to get down the mouth. I'm in Louisville, Kentucky, and you know what? An ag lender for farm credit came up and told me. He says, my younger farmers are actually weathering this economic reset better than my older farmers. And I go, get out of here. He says, yeah, they own a lot of land and they're fairly complacent. He says, my young farmers, they're doing the cash flow plans, they're analyzing the balance sheet, they know the critical numbers, they have good records, and they focus on marketing, finance, and business management other than production, and they're getting a bigger piece of the smaller pie. So, if you heard my talk being gloom and doom, this is opportunity out here. In other words, it's called business IQ. And boy, if you have that strong business IQ, you're going to get a bigger share of a smaller type of pie, even though some of your peers out there, older peers, may own all the land, they're not necessarily that profitable. Here's another kicker. This is 2016, this is 2017. We find the farms up to 500,000 in revenue fairly resilient. There's a top 20 and a bottom 20%. But those farms will often have multiple sources of revenue. They oftentimes have off-farm income, and they live modestly. So people will say, well, small farmers going out of business. Not necessarily. I find they're real resilient. But go back home tonight. You're going to have Thanksgiving, and you'll be over the Thanksgiving table. There's a couple of break points. 500,000 in revenue, $1 million, and $2 million. What we find is right about $1 million, or actually at 500,000, the lines start spreading apart. Then at $1 million, they get wider, and then at $2 million, they get really wide. And you'll see the difference between the top 20% and the bottom 20%. It can be $300,000, $400,000, or $500,000. Now, I've got to look at all of you in your 13 locations. It comes back to having good business management practices. That's the common denominator between what I call the green liners and the red liners. And that's been starting to occur all the way from 2013 right on down through. Now, I came up with a brand new slide. This is brand new, folks, for you all. And one of the things is oftentimes I come up to the farm days with Alicia up at State College. And so, again, I didn't want people to say, well, I heard him up at State College and you had the same things. Well, this is all brand new. I came up with 10 characteristics of successful agricultural producers. Okay? And here's your 10 characteristics. Number one, you're very goal-focused and balanced. When you go through the exercise in the AgBiz planner of doing your goals, it'll be one of the toughest exercises you go through. You know why? You've got to think about what your business goals are, what your family goals are, and your personal goals. And everybody says, oh, that's easy. It's easy to keep them in your head, but it's difficult to write them down on paper. Can I make a suggestion? If I've got husband and wife team, partners in here, or if you've got a large complex business, if you go through that exercise, make sure everybody does them separately and then compare. And one of the things you got to be careful of is alpha. There'll be somebody in the family or some dominant one that'll try to take over on all the conversation. So if everybody does them themselves, everybody gets a say at the table. And use your mentors or use, some of your peers as counsel to balance it out. Now you notice I put business, family, personal. That's how you get your balance. And can I add 3 more that sometimes we'll put in? Physical, mental, and spiritual. And one of we call it the 6 degrees of goal setting. Very, very important, because in today's Twitter world, and one of the things I've noticed around the tables, not every boy at the banker convention last week, I saw it. Well, I better be careful where I said I was. I saw some CEOs and CFOs. All they were doing was hiding under the table on their technology. But if you can kind of listen up, one of the things is we're bombarded with all this technology today. Did you hear our first panelist say? He said, one of my biggest struggles is time management. Sometimes you got to shut off your technology and kind of hear the silence and think longer term. And I like to have 1-year goals and 5-year goals. Don't go too much out past 5, because that's where subsequent business plans are tweaked. The second thing is, and this is an exercise, we got to do a webcast at 1 o'clock to Minnesota. And one of the exercises I'm going to require the producers to do up there is to write down 5 to 7 words that define success for you. Okay? That is one of the things that I'm doing today, because in this economically challenged environment, this is really requiring people to kind of step back and say, why am I in business? And oftentimes it's not about profit, and that's okay, but you still got to have cash flow. And so 5 to 7 words that define success for you. And again, if you're in a family setting, partner setting, have everybody do them separately. Here is a piece of advice from a farm credit CEO. I asked him at a young farmer meeting like this. I go, Bill, give 2 pieces of advice for the people who have been successful young farmers. He said, simple. Make sure they invest in productive assets, land, machinery and equipment, livestock, but also people. But you know what he said? The second thing is, make sure they live modest. And he says, one of the things that's very important, that modest living, sometimes you have to sacrifice for the business, but again, it comes back to the goals. Are people willing to sacrifice? So you can kind of see how the AgBiz planner is playing right in. Now, the next big one, oh boy, I'm glad Alicia and I had a chance to listen to the panelists this morning. Develop your cash flows, but then monitor them either monthly or quarterly. That's a big assignment for all of you, okay? We do that at the creamery. It's called variance analysis in business world, but you kind of make your projections, and then here's the actual. And you know what variance analysis, or doing this number 5, does? It requires you to open your business plan and tweak your business plan as you're going along. That one right there, start. It is one of the critical ones for success. And oftentimes your lender, you can sit down with your lender. It's good to have another set of eyes on the book. Number 6, realize this, that economic factors creates opportunity and challenges. And it's a challenge sometimes when you don't do scenario analysis. Wonder if we get too much rain, which all of us have had here on the East Coast. What happens all of a sudden? We put a tariff and soybeans drop $2 a bushel, or we tear up NAFTA and it drops milk prices $2 a hundredweight, or interest rates increase. Now, the only thing about this, it gives you your critical pathways by doing this scenario analysis, and it keeps you out of the ditch. But it also, again, it helps you with the communication with your partners and your lenders. Now, here comes the next big one. Write this one down. Follow the management principle of better before bigger. Now, up at the farm show each year, I always stress this, but it's called the 5% rule. And I got to read something to you from last week's conference. Great handwriting, okay? But it was one of the 15 principles I took away from the national conference last week, and I took 22 pages of notes. Why are some borrowers more profitable than others? That was a question posed. And you know what Bob Craven of FinPact said? And he's a farmer from western Minnesota. They're a little bit better on production. He said, in my area, 9 bushels makes a difference. They're a little bit better in marketing, 10 to 20 cents difference. They're a little bit better than in cost control. In other words, and they really focus on fixed cost management, and they're a little bit better in asset turnover. In other words, that is revenue divided into your assets. In other words, they're being employed fully. It's called the 5% rule. Try to be a little better. And that's why you do your business plan and you monitor your business plan, because you want to be a little bit better in other areas. Here's the other one. If you're profitable, follow the 60-30-10 rule. 60% goes for growth and efficiency. 30% of your profits is held back for that working capital. Remember, cash is king, but I've also changed that. Cash is queen, because if you've ever played chess, the most important player on the chessboard is the queen. You give it up, you give up moves. And then 10% enjoy yourself. Life's short, you've got to have some pleasure. Principle number 9, be interdependent rather than independent. You know what the badge of courage, and we talked about it at the conference last week, haven't missed a milking in 14 years. That is so 1950, 60, and 70-ish. And the key is, it's about people being interdependent. Remember what the panelists said? One of the major benefits is the peer associations that you're going to make here, not only through this program, but 5 years, 10 years, 15 years from now. I'm sitting down with a lady, they're from upstate New York, they're milking in 2 barns, 3X milking. And one of the things is, she says, I can't get my husband away from the farm. He won't come out to conventions like this, etc., etc. Classic example of being independent versus kind of interdependent, kind of seeing. And, they're kind of struggling economically, but they're also just kind of struggling kind of what direction they're going to go. You know what the final thing is? Best crop you'll ever raise will be your children. Make sure that whether it's your children, grandchildren, or interested agriculturalists, oftentimes what we find is successful producers are servient, they give back. Now, here's my 10 reasons to be optimistic. There's less competitiveness for resources, more opportunity to get started. That'll vary by area, but a lot of people, the bloom is off from agriculture. 5-10 years ago, prices were high, everybody wanted to be in. You're going to see an accelerated discontinuance of baby boomer farmers. You watch it, and it's going to be coming at you. You're going to be agri-entrepreneurs with diversified streams of income. You're going to get a little income here, there. Here's the other thing that we're starting to see. Boomeranger young farmers and ranchers. They've gone away, worked 5 to 10 years, maybe in business, industry, worked in a plant, and they're coming back. That they bring a lot of energy to agriculture. And one of the things is technology allows us to multitask. Matter of fact, Bob was telling me, Craven, that I talked about before. He operates a 1,200-acre grain farm in western Minnesota, but still has pretty well full responsibilities at the University of Minnesota. And he says it combines. And he says, I can monitor field conditions through the technology. And again, this is exciting. I already mentioned this one, 21% of the farms. Here's one of the benefits of going through a program like this. You know what? One of the things going through a program like this, they call it the 5 C's of credit. And you'll hear about cash flow, collateral, conditions. Going through a program like this, you know what it helps identify? Character. Do you have the fortitude and willingness to sacrifice and go through a program like this? And I can tell you, there's educational programs and financial programs out there to assist young farmers. But you got to take time and you got to have the discipline to follow through. And boy, that character coefficient, it's going to be observed over the next year or two going through the program. Asset and capital requirements. Some machinery and equipment's down to 50% right now. I was at auction the other day. Sold 50 cents on a dollar. Here's the other thing about the AgBiz Planner. It'll allow you to kind of collaborate and kind of do some talent sharing. And then I talked about raising a family. So I've rambled on here for about 45 minutes before I hit my final slide. I'll come back. Here's what I want to do. I want to take 5 minutes, and everybody in your locations, I'd like to have at least one question from each location. So I'm going to shut down here. I've got approximately 11:37, okay? I have to watch out because I'm in different time zones. I'll give you 7 minutes, and then we'll come back and do rapid fire question, and I'll have you introduce yourself, and then it'll be the group question. So 7 minutes, I'll see you in 7 minutes. So I want to see everybody talking. Go. All righty, here we go. Time's up, and I'm gonna call out random locations and introduce yourself and just the question, and I'll try to get through as many as I can because we've got 14 locations. Meadville, let's go Western Pennsylvania, the Snow Belt. Meadville, you got a question for me, quick.
Yeah, this is the prophet Phil Taylor in Meadville. I just told this clan he's going to start with Meadville. I'll bet you any money he starts with Meadville. So you did. Perfect. And we've got
How much
3
money
questions.
you make?
All right, I'm Braden Byler, and my question is, being we're due for a recession, what would you recommend as far as planning for this recession, and just how soon do you think it is?
Yeah, I can see a recession over the next 12 to 15 months, and for agriculture, I don't think it's going to have that much of an impact. But one of the things about a recession is keep your credit and your credit scores and credit reports good. Number 2, try to keep 4 to 6 months of your living needs in cash. Cash is very important in a recession. Can I tell you why? Because you'll buy other people's assets at 60 cents on a dollar. And one of the things is keep focused, keep your nose to the ground, and you're going to be okay. The recession is really going to hit the coastal economies in the urban areas where they've built up a lot of debt. So that would be 3 things that you would do.
Okay, thank you.
So, are we still on?
Good.
So, in relation to the recession, you spoke about how older baby boomer farmers are going to be getting out at a more rapid pace. I guess you mentioned that cash would be the thing that you want to keep on hand, but is that kind of what you would say the trend is going to be for what happens to their assets, is getting soaked up by younger farmers? Or
Yeah, what will happen is that baby boomer farmers, they're going to frustrate you because they're going to stay more active in farming 5 to 10 years because of their health situation, because of technology. But the other element is make sure you keep not only cash, but your ability to borrow. So when that farm comes up for sale, or you've got an opportunity to buy part of it, you can jump right on it. And that's why going through this program, what you might want to do is say, wonder which baby boomer farmers are going out. You might have alternative A, B, C, and D. I know some young farmers that do that out there. Well, hey, I'm going to move.
Can we get one more in? Can we get one more in?
I'd like to, sorry about
We got it.
I got to go to Butler, north of Pitt.
You kind of answered some of our question. Out of the group in our room, most of us don't own land. So I guess our question was, what was the best financial situation to be in to go to the lender to be able to make that large investment? What's our best option to have ready at that point in time?
Yeah, let's put it this way. Because you're a young farmer and you're starting out, you aren't going to have a real strong balance sheet. But if you can go to that lender and show that you've been profitable, that you have a cash flow, you're willing to make that sacrifice. In other words, you might leverage some off-farm income to buy that land and show demonstrated ability to sacrifice that off-farm income to purchase it, and then have a good sound business plan with a plan A, B, and C. That is going to do you very, very well. And you got to remember, when Farm Credit looks at you or bank looks at you, one of the things is they just don't look at one factor. They'll look at repayment capacity, character, all those other factors. So what you got to be is strong in those elements to offset maybe limitations on the balance sheet. Okay? All right.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, Alicia, you call it out.
All right, how about Frederick, Maryland? Have someone in Frederick?
Hi there. So my question is with regards to the recession that you're speaking about, or potential kind of fluctuations in the market and the impact that would have on very small scale agriculture, so market garden, farmers market, CSA, because people aren't going to have as much money to spend on the sustainable kind of story?
Can I throw this one out? Believe it or not, it's probably not going to be as much of an impact on the farmers markets and some of those, because it'll be the major purchases like automobiles, homes, etc., etc. You got to remember, millennials and Gen Z, 75% of what they buy experiences in small dollar amount. In other words, it might be under 10, it might be under $20. And so they will, as long as they're getting that personalization experiences, they're going to come to your farmers markets. They're going to come to those other elements. But I got to throw this one out. I was talking to an individual the other day who said farmer market traffic is down. And one of the things they talked about at the conference is Amazon. And so one of the things that you got to think about is, how do I capture that technology market to bring that experience to that individual? And again, I don't see it hitting the smaller markets as much. And I'm asked that question a lot about organic, all that. Is it a fad? No. It goes up and down. But this next generation is looking at point of origin. Who is producing that product? Alicia, take her away.
All right, let's go to Lewisburg.
Okay.
You went to Lewisburg? All right.
Yeah, this is Kyle Espenshade. One of the questions that we would have is, how do we handle these NGO groups? I guess one of our concerns is, how do we inform the general public on what we're doing to keep the impact on us limited?
Boy, one of the things that you got to do is don't get caught up in their emotional rhetoric. You have to come with a logical statement and different things. And this is where I think one of the things about this program, it's bigger than Farm Credit. You've got, all sorts of sponsors and different things. And you have to come with a united front, keep it fairly logical, and, kind of story out there. PETA shows up at our back door. Of course, PETA's in our back door down here. And the one thing that they like to have you do is get into the emotional type of rhetoric. And so if you can kind of keep it logic, et cetera, and then find individuals that would be your advocate. And I got to tell you, a group that's untapped is 4-H and FFA. Let's put it this way. Those youngsters know, kind of the technology. They know the younger generation. And that group right there needs to be empowered. They can be tremendous advocates in our school systems, et cetera, et cetera. So that's just some thoughts. It's out there. It's kind of spooky and scary. And where we're seeing more of the issues in the United States, Europe right now. And it's just amazing how that's shaping agriculture in Europe right now. Probably 5 years ahead of us. Alicia, quick.
All right, countersport.
Countersport. My good folks in countersport.
I'm the only one here. And no questions from me, but thank you for taking the time to share your knowledge with us.
Well, and thank you for coming in, being once the loneliest number. That gives me, Phil, a chance for another question if I get done. Okay.
All right. Okay, let's go to York.
All right. You had mentioned a little while back that the present situation creates a good atmosphere for young and beginning farmers. Can you just give some specifics on, even though things look a little down financially, things of that nature, how does this create a good atmosphere for young beginning farmers?
But no, it creates a good atmosphere because you go about 5, 6, 7 years ago when milk was 28, beef was up there, and grain was up there. Everybody wanted to come into the industry. It was just like a magnet. Now there's fewer people. And so with fewer people, there's a little less competition. And also this economic stress that we're going through, it's getting the older generation to say, do I really want to do this? And whereas 5, 6 years ago, you couldn't pry them loose if they were producing grain over on, Maryland Eastern Shore. When you got $8 corn, they're going to be there. But now you get down to $3, $4 corn. I don't know if I want to be able to do this. The other element that I think is really important is that what's exciting about the younger generation of agriculture is not one size fits all. You don't have to have X amount of cows. You don't have the X amount of acreage. And so oftentimes I see this younger generation or newer generation, they'll have different sources of income. They might have off-farm jobs. They might have multiple types of enterprises, where the older generation tended to think, you know, linearly and linear. And one of the things is they wouldn't think about the other opportunities. One thing I'm real strong about, the younger generation, they're multitaskers. And that's where time management is real critical. And then the other thing is assets are cheaper, particularly cheaper. That keeps your fixed costs down.
All right, how about Dover? A question for Dover.
One thing we kind of bounced around was you get the old adage of it takes money to make money, and for a lot of us, all the inputs are going up so much, the cost to enter is so high, and the lenders they're not as apt to lend money to you. How do you go about that, trying to secure money to get started?
It is tough, because one of the things is margins are down, and you do have these inflationary costs. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, but that is why you're going through the AgBiz planner, because if you come in with a business plan, it's not going to guarantee you're going to get a loan, but it increases the chances. And oftentimes, we have next door neighbor cash out nice 401k going to farming. No business plan, everything's top of mind. It's going to be interesting to see if he's around 5 years from now. So, bottom line is that doing a business plan gives you that competitive edge. Did you hear what our panelists said? Knowing that cost of production is very critical. So, do I go with beans? Do I go with corn? Do I grow hay? Where is my biggest profit potential? So, excuse me, got a little bit of cough. The other element is, remember, you don't have to own assets to control. Renting, leasing, sharing is a nice way to lower that fixed cost down there. So, again, good question. Those are some of the responses. Alicia?
All right, let's go to New Stanton.
Hi. I think you answered part of our question really just by talking about focus on personalization and experience. But if you're not Land O'Lakes with 18 statisticians that have their thumb on the pulse of current trends and future trends, what do you say is the best way to keep up with where that's going?
It's real interesting. You can read, and you know, there's a lot of articles out there, even in the farm papers today. But you know what your best thing is? You know what's the best thing for our creamery? Our home delivery division. Because we're in touch with the customer every day. And just being out there observing, listening, at the farmer's market. What do they like? What, you know, what's everybody else doing? Try to do something a little bit different. Our big challenge at the creamery is we try to be 3 products and services ahead of everyone else. And so just those eyeballs and those ears. God gives you 2 of these ears, one mouth. Sometimes you just got to kind of shut up and listen to kind of some of the trends, and then reinforce it, you know, with some of the readings, et cetera, et cetera. You know, I'm blessed. You know how I'm blessed? I travel. And boy, I'll tell you what, you pick up very, very quickly on some of these trends. That's where we picked up on the 4-ounces, because a lot of hotels were offering the 4-ounce ice cream.
All right, I think we have 5 locations left. Let's get through them here. Chambersburg.
Yep, Chambersburg. Here we go.
Okay, we have 2 questions. We'll let you pick which one you want to answer. One is on global trade and one is on human communication. So which one would you prefer? Or both? Can we do both?
Go.
All right, Caleb, go ahead.
My question was about, you said about China building infrastructure in other countries. I'm guessing that's going to increase the economic power of those countries. I guess my question was wondering whether the protein catch or their infrastructure demanding more, the people there demanding more, how will that affect prices in the future? Obviously, their infrastructure is going to help with economic boom and make their living better.
If you really think about it, we have about every 7 years, the size of the United States, about 330, 340 million people move into the middle class. When you move into middle class, you eat more protein, you drive vehicles, and you're clothed better. And so that trend right there is very, very positive. The only element I will say, China's making all this investment, but the new leader in Brazil that was just elected, he's kind of anti-China. And so China's going to have some fits and curves, and so it's just not going to be smooth sailing. And so this is why international trade is real critical to us, because again, that 1 out of every $5 establishes prices here. And what we've got to do is target those countries and those individuals moving into the middle class out there. And so I'm pretty positive of some of the things that we see out there. Next question.
The other question is on dealing with the person that you're in a partnership with that's dominant. They may listen to your input, but ultimately just make the decision regardless. Dealing with those type of people, what do you suggest, how to go about it?
Yeah, can I tell you, one of the best things, you can make about a $35, $40 investment for that individual and yourself and do a dispersonality profile. And boy, that's one of the most powerful management things I've ever done. And it tells you, how to communicate with that individual, how you communicate, et cetera, et cetera. Until you understand that, until they understand that, they'll just plow right over you. You're dealing with a D. And again, sometimes in dealing with a D alpha, one of the things that you have to do is you have to use a little bit different strategy. And you know what? They'll hurt your feelings. And you know what? Sometimes they will make the wrong decision. And so if you're the analytical, for example, one of our panelists this morning, I was telling Alicia, he's a high C. He was an analytical. An analytical goes very well with that D personality because they blend their talents. And it gets that individual to see 1 and 1's equal to 3. 1 with him could go negative very quickly. Okay? Here we go. Quick.
Okay, Martinsburg.
Yep, Martinsburg. Hey, didn't want to forget you. Let's go.
Okay, we've had a couple questions, but one of them was about niche marketing, which you kind of answered. One question that I thought of was in regards to trade deals, and China seems to be the big question going forward. Do you see us getting a deal with China? I've heard like any different schools of thought, and then I've also heard that they're just going to wait till 2020 to.
Yeah, outlast President Trump. Here's the way I look at it. I think we'll get a deal, some sort of a deal with it, but here's the other thing. Asians and the Chinese tend to be very patient. And they're a communist country. And so what happens is they can be patient. And so I think what will happen is we will probably get a deal, probably not of our liking, but the other thing is they will wait us out till 2020 and use that power play. And it's not only China, it's that whole Asian region. Because you got to remember, Asia, 3 out of every 7 people in the world are in Asia. And they will be that rising middle class, which I talked about before. So, yep, patient, but I do see some deal being made. And it's going to be interesting with the House of Representatives and Senate out here, how that one plays out.
Okay, we're down to 3 left here. We'll get through these. Mount Joy. Have a question on Mount Joy?
Yes, we do, Doc. Thank you for speaking with us here.
Thank you.
A very heavy dairy industry down in our area. I'm from a dairy farm originally, and I work with a lot of producers in the area. And you're saying that there's a lot of opportunity in these incoming and these new farmers coming in. Whereas I find that if they've entered the industry in the past 5 years, or put up a new barn, or bought the facilities from mom and pop, that they have a tremendous debt load, both long-term and short-term debt loads. How do we stop the bleeding? And then kind of a secondary question from those in the group that aren't from the dairy industry, how do we choose which correct diversification market to pick? There's so many different options that we can choose from. How do we decide which is best?
It's a question I'm going to answer on the second webcast in about an hour up into Minnesota. One of the things is, how do we stop the bleeding? This is where it's real critical, that cash flow that the one gentleman was talking about on the panel. In other words, you just see how far you're falling behind or whether you're break even. And you got to monitor that. And can I tell you why? A lot of these folks that expanded, they got more commas and more zeros on the income statement and the balance sheet. And things can get out of control real quickly. I'm worried about the dairy industry. How can I put it? I don't want to be gloom and doom, but it's macro forces, it's Amazon, it's Whole Foods that are really shaping kind of where we're going out there. So monitoring very, very closely. On diversification, you diversify to the strengths of your resources, to your talents, and to your marketplace. You have to pass 3 sniff tests, okay? In other words, it's consistent with the resources you have, consistent with the talents that you have, and then consistent with the marketplace. So you analyze it from a 3-pronged approach. Oftentimes, diversification is not the thing to do. Sometimes it is. It has to pass those 3 sniff tests. And by the way, you asked a very good question, sir, to the panelists there this morning. I was very proud of you.
Thank you. I heard you speak at the nutrition conference at Penn State the other couple weeks ago. You did very well. I enjoyed that.
Okay. You know what spooked me out? Remember the speaker before me?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was great.
The
And I
50
was telling you, yeah, he went out to 2066. All of you need to hear this. And I asked him, didn't I, right in my talk, how many dairies did he expect to have around 2066? And don't shoot the messenger. He said 3,000. And that really kind of spooked me out because dairy farming is the heart and soul of a rural community. But there's these big forces driving, that out there. Hey, final 2.
Okay, final 2. Tawanda, let's go to Tawanda.
All right, I'm sitting with a couple of folks that operate a greenhouse business where they're typically affected by rising gas costs and changing shipping costs. But how do you predict the changing economy to affect their particular market in regards to maybe consumer purchasing trends?
Yeah, well, I'll just come back on energy. One of the things is you'll see more consistency in energy. Oil prices will stay 40, 60 bucks a barrel. Natural gas is going up. And of course, many greenhouses use there. But the whole thing is, even in a downturn, people will buy plants. They make the little small types of purchase. People are doing a lot of renovation rather than new homes. Where the recession really gets you is on new homes. And always remember this, it's fun to kind of predict your business with new homes. Whatever you see the price of a new home, add 25%, and that will be the landscaping and all the other type of stuff. In a recession, they want to buy the home. Yeah, new homes don't move. So I still see people doing the fixing up, doing the necessary landscaping that may come back. So you're halfway recession proof, but if you got all your eggs for new homes, it's going to be tough in a recession because you'll see those housing starts go from about 1.3 million down to about 700,000-800,000. That's a lot. Okay?
All right, finish up with Reedsville.
All right, one question here is because farming, the industry tends to do much better in a down economy. Could you expand a little bit on the why that is and the why is it such a seesaw effect? Why can't it be more of a level playing field?
Yeah, very, very good question. And what happens is agriculture in rural areas tend to be commodity based, okay? General economy tends to be consumption based. On the U.S. economy, 7 out of every $10 in this country is spent for consumption. And so what will happen is when you have a recession, people will cut back on that consumption, major purchases, et cetera, et cetera. And what will happen is there will still be demand for commodities, particularly overseas. You got to remember, when the U.S. is down, sometimes the emerging nations are doing very well, which happened in 2009. So there was a tremendous demand for food, fiber, and fuel, and that just uplifted the rural areas. And there was also a tremendous demand for manufacturing, and we also had what? Low value of the dollar, which encouraged export. And so think consumption, and then think commodity and product production, and that's why that is counter-cyclical. Hey, Meadville, get your last one in.
Yeah, Stanley here. I had to wonder, you were talking about this recession, how the growth population also will play into with the recession and the need for more food.
No, well, they will eat more food, but they'll eat selective food. In other words, what will happen is, yeah, everybody thinks they're all going to go to Walmart. Believe it or not, during the 2009 recession, we saw our milk sales actually increase 20%. Yeah, and we thought we were going to be in trouble. We saw our ice cream sales up. But you know what helped us? Tainted milk in China. And all of a sudden, that consumer says, well, we want to know that that milk came from these 4 farms, which we have 4 or 5 farms in our creamery. And just amazing. Adverse event internationally, recession, people, you know what they like to do? Have what they call pleasure. Eat our ice cream. They would go locally, come to our store, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what was going on. And so sometimes that can be even counter-cyclical. Hey, I've gone 10 minutes into your lunchtime, and I got everybody. And first of all, thanks for the big attendance all throughout. Hopefully I'll see you somewhere where I'm speaking. And one of the things is Alicia and I try to make it up for the graduation class. Excellent questions this morning. Matter of fact, I could write a lot of articles on that. And I just really appreciate you taking time and investing time in going through this program. As I said, brains and business IQ and that type of mindset will drive profits into the future. So you're doing the right thing. So have a good Thanksgiving, good holiday out there, and thanks for allowing Alicia and I to be on. So I went 5-10 minutes in your time. I apologize, but thanks again. Great questions. Meadville, I did get your third one in.
All right, back to Kayla.
Thank you. Dr. Cole and Alicia, thank you for joining us today to kick off our AgBiz Masters program again this year. We really appreciate you sharing your valuable and thoughts and expertise about managing success in this ever-changing environment. Can we get a round of applause for Dr. Cole?
Good luck.
Leslie Hoover has joined me in the Reedsville office for our next session. Leslie is an accounting officer here at AgChoice. She and the rest of the accounting team serve customers across the AgChoice territory for all of their accounting needs, from tax preparation, cash flow analysis, payroll and records, all of the above. She has 2 degrees from Wilson College, one in accounting and one in economics. Leslie lives in Center Hall, but was raised on a dairy farm in Lancaster County. While her family no longer milks, they continue to run the farm as a crop operation that helps support their neighbor's large dairy operation. She is also a dressage rider and has been working to train her horse, Giovanna, for competitions in 2019 after the tax season. Today, Leslie is going to spend a few minutes explaining the recently enacted Tax Cuts and Job Act and how it impacts you as a young and beginning farmer and your 2018 taxes. It's yours.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone. As a reminder, the PowerPoints are in your packet, so you can pick out what might be the most boring one of the day because it says tax updates. As Kayla said, I'm the accounting officer here out of our Seven Mountains, but also our Coudersford office. So I go all the way up to the New York border, and sometimes I actually get to go across it. But as I'm sure you all have heard over various media outlets, whether it's social media, whether you took place in one of our tax update webinars, last month, a lot of stuff happened last December in passing the tax law. And it's over 200 pages. We're not going to go over everything in those 200 pages, but we wanted to highlight the things that are really key for you guys to know as we go into the 2018 tax filing season. So Hopefully with today's objectives, you'll learn a couple new things, and if you have questions, hopefully we'll have some time for those at the end. Who's going next? We're just going through. Okay, just wanted to check. So as always, I am an accountant, so there is a bit of a disclaimer. We go through and we look at the tax laws, we read the regulations and everything, and we're having this session, but at the end of the day, our advice or what we say could be subject to change. Case in point, there's something we're going to go over towards the end here. I don't even have regulations on it yet, so whatever I say could be completely wrong or it could be thrown out before we even file a tax return. So, just case in point, take everything with a grain of salt. The first stuff we're going to go over is just what is really key to individuals, and then we'll kind of morph into your business and what is going to affect you there. So probably one of the biggest things in the newspaper and on television and social media was that the standard deductions increased. And that is definitely true. For those who are filing jointly, your deduction went up to $24,000. Head of household, $18,000, and all other individuals like myself who are single, $12,000. This is really nice because the personal exemption for yourself or for your dependents was eliminated. And there's no chance of getting that until 2026 again, when it could revert back to the other laws. To help counterbalance that and the increased standard deduction, the child tax credit was increased to $2,000. Basically, this doubled. It used to be just $1,000 per qualifying child, so now we're up to $2,000. Now, our team has done some analysis previously, and if you're married and you have 2 or 3 kids, you're really not coming out any differently than you would have before. The numbers are still the same. For those who have kids who are going to be turning 18 or above that 17 years old age, you're definitely going to see a difference because they're not worth the full $2,000 like they were previously when they were younger. So make sure that you're just kind of keeping that in mind as you're meeting with your tax preparer. A couple of other things, especially when it comes to individuals, you used to be able to write off any amount of state tax that you paid, including your property taxes and your real estate taxes, outside of your farm or your business or those things. And that has been limited to $10,000. So if your real estate taxes are $11,000 for just your house, you can write off only $10,000 of that 11. So just a simple example there. Again, if you have a farm or a business on your property, the real estate taxes connected to that business don't have any limitation. So that was something that a lot of people have confusion about. Mortgage interest is another one that a lot of people are confused about. If you have mortgage interest that is connected to your business, again, that is deductible. If you have mortgage interest that is connected to your personal residence, that is now limited. And when it's limited, it means that if you have a home equity loan, for instance, that home equity loan can only be deducted if it was connected to purchasing the home or if it was connected to improving the home. So if you went out and you got a $30,000 home equity loan to do $20,000 of improvements to your house, and then the other $10,000 was used to buy a fifth wheel camper, you could use the portion that was done to do improvements to the house, but the camper doesn't count. And it's not a second residence. so it still doesn't count. But so that is the change with the mortgage interest. But again, if it's connected to your business or your farm, you're good to go. Other things that were considered, itemized deductions, just consider them gone. Things like personal mileage, union dues, investment expenses, tax preparation if it's not connected to your business, all of those itemized deductions just went poof. They might come back in 2026 or after, but until that point, they've just gone poof and you can just forget about them. So that's one of the big changes. When it comes to, some of you might be thinking about the health deductions, those areas, still keep track of those and give them to your tax preparer. Some of the thresholds still exist about whether those are deductible or not, but, until you go to actually run the numbers of your own tax return, it's worth keeping track of them and giving them to your tax preparer, especially if your tax preparer is up on all the rules, which they should be. But that's kind of it for the individual provisions, and we'll kind of keep moving along and morph into our business ones. The biggest one that everyone talks about is Section 179 expense. And just as a refresher or new to everyone, this is where you go out and you buy that new tractor or used tractor. New. Who buys new? You go out and you buy that used tractor and you just want to expense it on your tax return right away. Well, that still exists. And previous to 2018, you could only write off $500,000. So if you went out and you spent $501,000 on equipment or buildings that are, deductible, you could only write off $500,000. And now you can write off $1 million. So if you've got that kind of capital and that kind of ability, you can go out, spend $1 million, and you can write it all off on your tax return. Not saying that's what you should do. I'm just saying it's totally possible. Another thing that changed when it comes to equipment is bonus depreciation. This used to be where you could go out and you could buy that piece of equipment and you could get bonus deduction for it of 50% without using any of your Section 179. So it didn't affect that bucket of $1 million. Well, now you can do 100% of bonus depreciation without touching your $1 million Section 179 bucket. And that does decrease. If you look at the little chart that's in your PowerPoint, 2018 it starts at 100 and then it goes all the way down to 20% once we hit 2026. However, just like Section 179, bonus depreciation has always been touched since it was created, so it may actually never drop to that point. We'll see. It all depends on the people in Washington, D.C. But using Section 179 and bonus depreciation are awesome tax planning tools. Just make sure you work with your tax practitioner to figure out the best way to use those. You don't want to use too much of one bucket and not consider how it's going to affect the other bucket. So just make sure you take the time to kind of talk about what you're thinking, or definitely say all the purchases that you've made with your tax practitioner. Moving on, still in that business category, and continuing on with the purchase of equipment. When we're talking about depreciation, basically when I sit down with a customer, I say, okay, did you purchase anything this year? Charlie says yes. Charlie bought a tractor and it was used. Well, that tractor goes into an automatic bucket of it is depreciated over 7 years. Now, if Charlie had bought a new tractor, it goes into a bucket of being depreciated over 5 years. And that is definitely different. Before it used to be everything like tractors and some of that standard machinery went into a 7-year bucket, and now it can go into a 5-year bucket if it is purchased as new. When it comes to this depreciation, we also are now, instead of using what was referred to as 150% declining balance, we use 200% declining balance. That's a lot of jargon in a small sentence. So basically what that means is things are depreciated faster at 200 versus 150. So don't get too caught up on that part. But the basic emphasis on this slide is if you buy something new, it goes into 5-year bucket for depreciation. If you buy something used, it goes into the 7-year bucket for depreciation. On the next slide, you'll see like-kind exchanges. Or if you've ever heard of the 1031 exchange, we're talking about the same thing. Previously, when you would take your old farm truck to the dealer and you would trade it in for a new truck or another used truck, you would trade it in, get a better price on your new truck, drive off the lot, and that was the end of it. You tell your accountant, such as myself, hey, I traded in this truck, great, end of story. Well, now, when you take that truck in, or that tractor, or that, that drill, whatever it is, and you trade it in, when it comes to the taxes, I have to treat that trade-in as an actual sale of a piece of equipment. So, on your tax return, there could potentially be some tax consequence to trading that piece of equipment in. Now, you still get the really good price on whatever you got, and took off the lot, whether it be that tractor, truck or drill. But when you trade something in now, it's just important to be cognitive of there could be a tax consequence to it. Before, when you would do that, it really was just kind of okay, we did this trade-in, no big deal, until you sell, the new piece of equipment you bought, no tax consequence. But they said, hey, this is an area where people are getting away with not giving the government more money, so they took it out. If you have actual real property, such as land or a farm, and you want to do a 1031 exchange that way because your neighbor down the road is selling, and you want to buy that property and just exchange it for the field you have next to it, you can still do that. That's still possible. But when it comes to things like equipment, tractors and trucks and cars, you have that potential tax consequence. The big deduction that is new, sort of, in 2018 is Section 199A deduction. My warning to you is, Kayla told you I have a degree in accounting and a degree in economics, and I'm an accountant. I can get really boring and really quickly, but I can also use a lot of jargon. And when it comes to this 199A deduction, there is a lot of jargon out there. And this is also one of the big areas where we don't have regulations on how exactly this is going to work. So just be patient with us accountants, because we're very confused and upset that we don't know the answers of how to calculate this 100%. But what this is it was created to eliminate another deduction that was called DPAD. There's a long, DPAD stood for Domestic Product Assistance Deduction. And it was a deduction that some businesses, but not all businesses, could get. Or if you are a milk producer and you ship your milk to a co-op, you got a letter at the end of the year saying, hey, this is your DPAD deduction being passed through. And that was eliminated with this 199A. This 199A that is replacing it means that if you have a business, and there's really no limits to it unless you're a doctor or lawyer or an accountant, you can qualify for a 20% deduction on your tax return, as long as you have a positive qualified business income. So as long as your business isn't necessarily in the red, you could get this 20% cut on your tax return. It doesn't impact your self-employment tax. So you still, as long as your business has income, you're still gonna have to pay self-employment tax, but it could really, really help out on your regular income tax expense. There are limitations to it. So, there are thresholds where if you're a single filer and your taxable income is $157,500, or if you're married and your income is $315,000 and above, that deduction will get smaller and smaller until it finally becomes zero as you go over those thresholds. This deduction is available if you're a sole proprietor, so you're the only one who owns your business, a partnership, an LLC member, or if you're an S corporation. So it's available to everyone outside of just, being an individual owner. To kind of help show how this can be complicated but broken down a little bit, there is a chart in your PowerPoint that just kind of helps outline some of the thresholds and some of the requirements. Just to give you an idea, it's estimated by the IRS and Cooper, that over 1 million hours is going to be spent figuring out what taxpayers can save using this 199A deduction, because it's just so big. A couple of other items to note though. I kept emphasizing that if your business has positive income, you'll get this deduction. If your business has negative income, you don't get this deduction. And that negative income actually carries over to the next years, and it could impact how much of that actual deduction you get when you do have positive income. So if you have negative 2,000 in your business this year, and next year you have positive 5,000, that positive 5,000 will be reduced by the negative 2,000 to a positive 3,000 in that deduction. So there could be some consequence there. Just another point to make sure that you're doing tax planning, if I haven't said that already. So another thing is a lot of times when we're working on transitions, or our business is growing and we're trying to figure out the best way to set our businesses up, we might have our farming operation in an entity, but we might also have our land in a different entity. And this 199A does allow us to take those and combine them so that we can get the biggest deduction possible. So that is also there. So those are still kind of the big points that I wanted to point out with that one. So that, in a very small nutshell, is what 199A is. And those are really the big things that I wanted to cover. So just to summarize, the standard deduction increased. Some of the things that you could deduct when you just were a sole proprietor and didn't have a business were limited. 199A could be a 20% deduction to you, but there are some limitations to it. So make sure you get with a tax practitioner who knows what's going on. So, and just another point. I myself am one of many on our accounting team, so if you have questions that you don't ask today here, please feel free to reach out to one of us or go through your loan officer or your local AgChoice person to get to us. So, but are there any questions that anyone has at this point? I know I did a lot of data dumping.
Well, thank you, Leslie. We appreciate you taking the time today to share your expertise on taxes. Let's give Leslie a round of applause. Well, great. Next we are going to move into a joint presentation from Leslie here in Reedsville and Phil Taylor, located in our Meadville office, on the importance of farm accounting and its direct impact on tax and business planning. Your two participants, from here on out, the program will be reviewed for you, so feel free to dismiss yourselves or stay unless you want a refresher. If you do decide to leave, make sure to hand in your completed survey and any registration materials or payment to your facilitator, and contact me with any questions. So at this point, you're familiar with Leslie. Joining us from the Meadville AgChoice branch out in western Pennsylvania for the presentation is Phil Taylor. Phil is an agricultural business consultant with AgChoice Farm Credit, serving the AgChoice's branch offices in western Pennsylvania. Phil works with farm operations to conduct all types of strategic planning, business planning, transition, succession planning, budgeting, and benchmarking. Phil's practical approach to business and financial management is greatly appreciated by his customers. Prior to joining AgChoice, Phil worked as an outreach specialist at Michigan State University Tell Farm Center, provided expertise in farm accounting, tax management, and business analysis for farm clients. In addition, he has been employed as an extension educator, service representative for a feed mill, and as a dairy farm manager. Phil earned a BS in dairy production from the Pennsylvania State University and an MS in agricultural economics from Michigan State University. Phil and Leslie, thank you for joining us today. We'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Kayla, very much. Welcome and afternoon, everybody, and just appreciate all your participation today. Hey, I want to call out to your attention first to a couple of handouts that are going to go along with our slide set and presentation today. You should have in front of you a copy of the 2015 Schedule F And you'll ask maybe why the 2015 Schedule F, and that's only because I didn't give Kayla a more current year to use as the handout. So that's the only reason, no special reason other than that. And then the other handout is what we call the Farm Finance Scorecard. On that, you'll see some red, yellow, and green lines and 21 financial indicators. We'll talk briefly about this as we go through our presentation today. I appreciate Leslie filling in. On your handout, you'll see that Steve Allen was going to be with us today, but Steve's got the unenviable job of doing and working with a tax audit today that the IRS told him he will be there and had no option in the plan. So that's one of the cool things about our art team is they can fill in and help each other out and cover for each other at a moment's notice. So we appreciate Leslie for doing that today. So our farm accounting background, we wanted to, as part of the AgBiz Masters class, give you a little bit of background in farm records accounting. We heard that this morning from our panel participants of how important they have learned this aspect of their business management is. And so we've been addressing this specifically in the AgBiz kickoff meetings for about 3 or 4 years now. And I give it a subtitle called The Bucks Start Here. And I use that simply because I believe as in my work as a consultant, virtually any financial management decision we want to make hinges on the data that we have gathered, collected, summarized, and held to for our records purposes from a financial standpoint. So I can't emphasize enough that it's extremely important, and we're going to talk about some of the reasons they're so important. So the purpose for our financial accounting is really simple. We're just gathering statistical data. It's a foundation to the business financial decisions that you're making on your farm businesses every day. But this is data such as income, expense, assets, and liabilities. It might have to do with capital purchases that you've made, sales, and depreciation. And Leslie outlined in the new tax law how important those sales and depreciation calculations are going to be for 2018. This data includes loans and repayments of those loans and keeping track of that information so we know at a moment's notice what our assets and liabilities are. Another bit of data that we use oftentimes in our analysis is the units of measure. And so as we're looking at making management decisions and analyzing our business, these units of measure can be extremely important. Dr. Cole emphasized the cost of production number. Well, without a unit of measure on how many production units we had, how will we know how many dollars it cost us per bushel of corn or bushel of apples that we grew? And many of our farm accounting software packages can track these units for us. So, some of the purposes for financial accounting, before I turn things over to Leslie for a few minutes, is that we, first of all, meet the requirements of our tax laws. And she's going to expand on that a little bit. So we want to look at our income tax or our self-employment tax or the different payroll taxes that are out there. Those are critical aspects of keeping good financial records. Secondly, and this is the area that I get more involved in, is analyzing the financial performance of the business. So we look at things like net worth. We look at the profitability of the business. Did the farm make a profit or not? And then cash flow. And you heard that over and over this morning in our discussions. Did the farm cash flow? Did we meet all of our cash flow obligations? Another one that we use at AgChoice frequently is in the benchmarking area, where we have farms that can pool their financial information, summarize it together, and then you can compare your results to the results of other farms that are grouped in a system that allows you to compare your cost of production to somebody else and make some observations about your operation that way. Any way you look at it, it's all about making decisions and having good information to do that. Whether that's decisions being made internally on your farm, because you're the owner or the manager, and the employees have some input there, or it might be decisions that are coming from external sources, like your loan officer, myself, an accountant, a trusted advisor that works with you from a financial standpoint. So all this information is extremely important for making these decisions. So I'm going to turn a few slides over to Leslie, and she's going to take it from here for a little bit.
Sorry about that. There's a mute button. So, like Phil said, I'm basically gonna go over some basic stuff. So you may have easily know what I'm talking about, so just bear with me then as I go over in kind of a review for you. So one of the big things is to know the difference between cash and accrual accounting. And basically the difference is about the timing between the two of them. When it comes to the cash form of accounting, we're talking about when it's received on the income side or when it's paid on the expense side. When it comes to accrual, we're talking about when income is earned versus when an expense is incurred. For an easy example, let's talk about corn harvesting. If you're doing cash accounting, you harvest your corn, you store it, and you don't sell it for several months. And when you get that check several months later, that's when you recognize the income of that corn harvest. If you're on accrual, you harvest that corn, you put it in storage, you know you're not going to get your check for several months. And when you've harvested, you've earned that income, so you have to count the income then. So again, the timing, when you acknowledge that income or expense, is the difference between the cash and the accrual. Most farmers use the cash method, basically because it is simpler. It's much easier to kind of keep track of your head, well, I definitely got that income, or I definitely paid that bill, versus always trying to keep on top of your accounts receivable or your accounts payable. The cash method is definitely a bonus to farmers where it does meet the standard tax reporting requirements for everyone. So most people use it. And because it is the basic form of record keeping, it's easy to make some simple adjustments to get to the accrual method to do a full analysis of your business or your farm. So those are the big things when we're talking about cash versus accrual. The other thing to keep in mind is that there are definitely different levels of keeping, financial accounting and record keeping. We like to break those down into the first level of filing your tax returns. In order to stay out of jail, you need to make sure that you're filing your tax returns. Again, farmers and businesses tend to do that with the cash method. You're keeping track of what you've received, what you've spent out. The bottom line is, what helps calculate if you're going to pay taxes or not. The next level is the business analysis, and that's when we're really talking about getting the full picture by doing accrual adjustments. So we're taking that information you keep for your tax return, making some adjustments from the balance sheet, like talking about what your accounts receivable, your accounts payable are, some inventory items, those types of adjustments, and being able to get a bigger picture. It helps to make sure that you're making some even more solid management decisions than just by looking in your checkbook or your shoebox or your truck console, whatever is your record keeping method. The next level up is the even more advanced level. It takes into account, the other two levels that we talked about, but it breaks things down into even more specific categories or enterprises within your farm or your business. So you've got a dairy operation and you want to be able to see what your costs and your productions are for just your group of milking girls versus just your heifers. Or, you've got your crop operation and you want to know what your cost of productions are when it comes to corn, when it comes to soybeans, or that couple acres of sunflowers your wife made you plant because it's pretty. Being able to separate things out so you can look at it from that enterprise position. Doing the enterprise, the cost management accounting can be a little difficult because you definitely need to be organized. And it can just, sometimes you're looking at that invoice from Pioneer and it's not broken out, and you need to be able to break it out according to the enterprises that you've got going on. So sometimes that can just be a little more difficult. So that's just the caution there. When it comes to records for tax purposes, which is your next slide, again, we're really looking at that. What did you bring in incomes? What did you put out on expenses? I rubbed your ear off about depreciation before, so what is going on there. But again, the basic advantages of doing that record keeping for tax purposes is that it's simple. It meets the IRS and the state requirements, so no one's going to get in trouble as long as you're not lying about something. And it's an important component of your basic business analysis. On the flip side, though, those disadvantages to just depending upon that records for tax purposes is that it doesn't give you that whole picture. You know, if all you're worried about is that tax consequence, and that's all your tax accountant ever thinks you're worried about, what could the two of you as a team be missing? You know, because you're not taking a look at the whole picture of those adjustments that we talked about from the balance sheet or that accrual picture, you know, there could be a true indicator of profit or loss that you're missing, and that could really come back to bite you in the butt. So it's simple, which is nice, but at the same time, the most basic simple thing is not always the best thing. Some things to keep in mind then on your next slide that our accounting team put in here to make sure we're in Phil's presentation is when it comes to your record keeping, it doesn't matter if you're doing it on computer or paper. You know, just because we're in the age of technology doesn't mean that, you know, a good old paper and pencil or pen doesn't work. Just make sure that when you're doing that, you're using a good chart of accounts, or, you know, in other words, you're using good categories to keep things organized and to be able to analyze what you're looking at. There are lots of software choices out there if you do decide to do it on the computer, whether that's QuickBooks, which is the one you see advertised the most, or an ag-specific software like Centerpoint that AgChoice likes to promote. You know, that doesn't matter. Just as long as you get it set up, you're really, you know, got your chart of accounts going, that's what's important. It's also important to make sure that you talk to someone about employee versus independent contractor. You know, this time of year, us accountants are talking about get ready for your 1099s and your W-2s. And if all you've got is 1099 people working on your farm and it's a rather large operation, you should probably have a conversation to see if you should switch them over to W-2s. That's something that the IRS is cracking down on more, and it, you know, at the end of the day, it really might not cost you more to put them on W-2s than to keep them on 1099s. Also, it's important to make sure that you're keeping good records so that we tax preparers know that we're categorizing your income correctly. So if it's really rent income and you just put that into, you know, your income category of general income, you know, rent income is not subject to self-employment tax. But if we don't know that, it all is getting put into the self-employment tax button and you're paying more self-employment tax, and nobody wants to pay that. You know, so making sure that you're keeping things organized so that at the end of the day, you can look at those things, you can make a good decision as a business manager, and I, as a tax preparer, can do the right thing for you. When it comes to receipts, make sure that you keep them. More and more these days, you know, people are saying, well, you know, I filed my tax return, I can get rid of the receipts from this year because I filed my tax return. No, yeah, that's not true. You should keep your receipts, especially for those big ticket items of $2,000 or more. You know, make sure you're keeping those for 5 years. You know, once that 5th year is up, have a bonfire, roast some marshmallows, you know, have a good time. But keep that information for 5 years so that you can reference it and pull it up. Because you never want to be that person who got rid of it and then needs it and you can't do anything about it. So that's just, you know, make sure you keep that stuff for 5 years. And with that, I'll give it back over to Phil.
Okay, thank you, Leslie. Let's continue on and talk about why the tax return in itself is not or is often a poor indicator of profit. So we look at our tax return, and at the bottom in the right-hand corner on line 34, for example, of our sample 2015 Schedule F, we have a negative number, or we have a good positive number. Whatever that number is not necessarily a good indicator of what the business's true profit was. Let me go over a few reasons why that's the case. First of all, there's no measurement of inventory changes on the Schedule F. So let's say, for example, in one particular year as a crop producer, you have a bumper crop. And at the end of the year, you've got significantly more grain in storage or crops in storage than you had at the end of the previous year. Now, being on the cash accounting system, you haven't had to report that income to yourself because you're going to sell it in the following year. But that's profit to the business. And so when you look at a thing such as when calculating inventory changes, there's not a line on the Schedule F that has to do with those inventory changes. The same is true for accounts payable and receivable. Let's say in these cash shortage times at the end of the year, at the end of 2018, our outstanding feed bill is a little higher than it was at the end of the previous year. Well, that's if we were being on the cash accounting system, that doesn't show up at that point. It's recorded in our books or on our books at the moment as an account payable. We owe that to the feed mill. But there's no line on the Schedule F that's going to capture that outstanding feed bill or vet bill or whatever bill it might be for any of our farms. Okay? So those are a couple of aspects that go into our profit picture when we analyze the business, but they're not on the Schedule F. There's no record on the Schedule F of our capital purchases or sales. There are other places in our tax return, but not on the Schedule F. And so it's not capturing those there. And then that monster we call depreciation, that there's a difference between a tax depreciation and what we refer to when we look at business analysis as economic depreciation. First of all, from a tax standpoint, we're depreciating those items to zero. So if we buy a tractor for $100,000, the depreciation calculation, if nothing else changes, will take that value or that tax basis to zero. Whereas on an economic basis, we know that after 10 years of using that tractor, there will be some value remaining in that. Now, there is a line on our Schedule F, happens to be line 14 on this 2015 Schedule F, that records our depreciation for tax purposes. Okay? And so we do have a cost there, but it's not necessarily an economic depreciation. We're using it for tax purposes. And Leslie showed you how quickly we can depreciate our new purchases in the current tax law. The next slide is a couple of examples on the inventory side. The Schedule F only captures part of the inventory. On the yes side, if we prepay something, as cash accounting, we can prepay for some inputs for the next year because we want to guarantee that we buy them at a certain price or have them to utilize. We prepay those expenses, and that expense would show up on our Schedule F if we prepaid our seed for the next year. And so we convert cash to inventory and use a Schedule F expense to do that. But some of the ones that aren't captured on the Schedule F we talked about. For example, we have an inventory change in value. We have more inventory than the previous year. Or the value per bushel of our inventory went up or went down. Those kinds of things. Number of units that we have, the number of sows that we have on the farm is greater at the end of this year than last year. The Schedule F is not going to capture that profit. The next slide, accounts receivable and payable. The things that are captured on the Schedule F are crop sales that we received, the vegetables that we sold, the vet bills that we paid, and the supplies that we purchased. However, it doesn't capture, for example, for our dairy producers out there, it doesn't capture the December final milk check because we haven't received that yet. We won't get that until January of the following year. It doesn't capture the unpaid commodity shipment. So on December 22nd, we shipped a load of steers, and we haven't received the money for that yet. The Schedule F isn't going to capture that, but we should have that on our balance sheet as an accounts receivable. Okay? And there are some others listed there, a utility bill that we haven't paid, a chemical bill, and we've got some accrued interest. So several items in our record-keeping systems, and a lot of them are not captured on that Schedule F. If we look specifically at capital, the change in our capital assets, the value of our capital assets from one year to the next changes, and that may or may not be captured on that Schedule F as depreciation. How about capital items bought and sold? And then another calculation for economic depreciation, which is generally much slower than our tax depreciation. And when we look at key financial measures, I'm going to call your attention to that farm financial scorecard that your handout is on. If you take a look at that for a moment. A lot of these 21 measures of farm and business financial indicators require information that's not available from our Schedule F tax return. Okay, so there's not enough information there. So if you look down that list, there are several. Net farm income is our true profit. It takes into account more than what's on the Schedule F tax return. The rate of return on assets, the current ratio is not a number that comes off the tax return. Okay, and continue down that list. There's several items that are measures of financial performance. We just won't get that information from the tax return, the Schedule F. Okay. And while we're on this page, Dr. Cole mentioned something this morning that I wanted to highlight is on this page, and he talked about, for a moment, working capital. He talked about building working capital and making sure that about 20% of that working capital was in cash. Okay. This farm finance scorecard can be a good resource for you in defining some of these financial terms like that. So you'll see it up at the top under the liquidity section. Line number 2 says working capital. Okay, so that tells you it's one of the 21 financial indicators. If you turn to pages 2 and 3 of this, the backside and then the next page, you'll see a description of what those indicators mean. And so line 2, working capital, tells us the operating capital available in the short term from within the business. So that gives us a description of what it is. Then if you flip to the back page of the scorecard, you'll see the actual equation for how to calculate that indicator. So working capital is simply the total current farm assets less the total current farm liabilities. Okay? So that's very helpful the scorecard can be to identify those financial indicators, tell you what it means, and then define it and give you the equation for calculating your own. But I thought since he mentioned it this morning, we ought to at least cover that working capital number to say, what does that actually mean? What is it? So I'm back to the slide set now, looking at records for business analysis. And so when we're looking at doing a business analysis from our standpoint as business consultants, we include the income statement. We look at trend analysis of the balance sheet. We want to know from historical perspective, how's the balance sheet changing? Is it improving? Are we growing net worth? Or is it going backwards? And then we reconcile those two statements together to say, how did things change and why did those things change? And so the requirement for this business analysis is that records for tax accounting. That's the starting point. And we add to that the beginning and ending balance sheets. Now we can see what's occurred between those balance sheets. We can reconcile that and make our adjustments to do a full accrual analysis of the business. The next slide is that green background slide. This kind of puts a little bit in a graphical form. We have our cash income less our cash expenses leaves us with net cash farm income. Then we make inventory adjustments up or down for things like feed and supplies, livestock inventories, those kinds of things, accounts receivable and payables. And that gives us a net operating profit. From that, though, we have to make capital adjustments and consider our depreciation. From there, we get an equation then that results in our net farm income, which is our actual true profit number. Okay? So there's considerably more steps involved than our cash accounting for tax purposes to arrive at a true profit picture. Lastly, we talked about, and Leslie introduced the idea of this enterprise accounting, looking at a further step of your records. This is where we're allocating income and expense to individual profit centers or enterprises. Okay? The difficulty here for many of our producers who attempt to use this is allocating the non-cash cost. Yeah, it's easy to say, okay, I wrote a check to one of our suppliers for the baskets that we use to sell our blueberries in. All right, that's a blueberries enterprise expense. But what about the depreciation on the equipment that we use to manage all of our crops? How do we split that up? So it takes considerable amount of time and effort to factor how much depreciation went to the blueberries this year versus the apples or versus the other enterprises we have. So it becomes very tedious, very detail-oriented, and it's a challenge. The other one that's in there is unpaid labor. How do we split out our unpaid labor, and why do we even keep track of it? We didn't pay anybody for that. However, it's still an expense to our business. It's still a calculation we look at as to how efficient is our operation from an hours of operation standpoint. Okay? Levels of enterprise accounting. You've got basic cost accounting. This is where you might be looking at cost of production per unit, where we're keeping track of our cost of production for corn or soybeans or wheat, and we want to be able to identify what those costs of production per bushel are for each of those. I've seen many people keep repair costs on certain pieces of equipment. And we'll just use a combine as an example because it's a major capital item for many of our farms. They want to know how much are we spending on repairs on this piece of equipment as a way to make a decision about when is the right time to replace that piece of equipment. So it could be quite as simple as that under your repairs chart of accounts, you're going to enterprise out the repairs just to the combine. Under a full enterprise analysis, that's where it gets much more difficult, where we're comparing all of our costs, allocating all of those expenses, whether they're actual cash expenses or non-cash items, and that becomes a much more challenging record-keeping system to complete. But it's a great way to help make decisions about how should our business change, what things should we be doing better or differently, perhaps even dropping some enterprises that haven't proven to be profitable. And this enterprise accounting certainly helps in making those decisions. Leslie, I'll let you take it over again as we finish up here.
I'm not going to give you any new information. I'm just going to kind of wrap up here, Phil and I talking. But just to emphasize what we've said, make sure that your record keeping is, first off, that you're doing record keeping, but make sure that it's organized, not just a shoebox, even if it is just on the simple cash accounting method for your tax purposes. But make sure you keep an idea of what those other items are, like your receivables and your payables, so that when you want to, you can use these tools that we've given you to do a better analysis. Make sure that if you're not doing tax planning or you're not sure about your tax repair, that you're having conversations with that person, or you're looking for a new person to make sure that you're getting the best viable option out of them. And make sure that you're using us at your local AgChoice offices as a resource as well. With that, I'll open it up for any questions for Phil or I, if there are any. This is hard looking at all the offices. I don't think we have any, Phil.
Yay! There's gotta be one. Who's Kenny when you need him?
Yeah.
All right, well, Phil and Leslie, thank you.
Well, thanks very much.
Today. That really was a great overview of general farm accounting and why it's important to both tax and business planning. We look forward to diving deeper into and expounding upon some of these concepts in future meetings. So let's give Phil and Leslie a round of applause. With that, we are going to wrap up today just talking about a few logistics for the AgBiz Masters program. You should have received a binder today in your location, so you'll want to grab that because we're going to go through some of the materials in there. So as you know, AgBiz Masters is a learning series geared towards young and beginning farmers that teaches business and financial management skills. It was created 10 years ago after hearing responses from other young and beginning farmers like you that helped identify that there was a need for this type of educational program. At the time, there were a lot of educational programs for the production side of things, but the industry really lacked programs that taught the key business concepts that are certainly an important aspect of our businesses. So at this point, although it's a diverse audience, these concepts pertain to everyone here, even if it's just personal. So hopefully you got to network again over lunch, get to know the folks in your room and the different expertise there. So AgBiz Masters really takes a blended learning approach. You have the text or the online modules, which we'll talk through in a few minutes, that really provide the base knowledge of the program. Then we have the added in-person meetings, just like this one, that really are focused on the additional topics and expound upon what you're learning in your modules. Provide you some case studies and additional resources to kind of connect those concepts. Then you have the networking and online discussion groups as well. So continue in those to discuss and acquire additional knowledge and resources in relation to that module content in the in-person sessions. So materials provided to you, you've got your binder. If you are registered with someone, you probably will only have one binder between the two of you. So you have to share, same with the online access. So whatever email you listed on your registration sheet first is the email that you will receive your module access in. And those again were sent out about 8:30 this morning. If you did not receive yours, please reach out to me ASAP and we'll get that set up for you so you're ready to get into those modules. So the first bright green sheet that we've talked about all day that you can't miss, the FAQ sheet is up front. Check to make sure that your question, if you have any, is not already answered on here. We cover a lot of information, how to access the online modules, the system requirements for the modules, timeline for both year 1 and year 2 completion. And again, those are not hard, fast dates, but they are highly suggested to keep you on track. The other thing to know is that, your in-person session in January for year 1 participants, you'll cover topics talked about in module 1 and 2. So if you don't complete those modules and you or try to complete them the night before, as Marlon suggested not to do earlier, if you don't complete those modules or you do rush to get them done, you might not be as familiar with the concepts that we discuss in that meeting. So really try to keep within that suggested timeline for completion, and the meeting dates are listed there as well. And then, of course, my contact information if you need anything there. The next sheet are the Facebook instructions to both create a Facebook account as well as the links to join the Facebook groups. So make sure to join those. Again, they'll have additional resources and knowledge, see some program reminders and updates, as well as those module discussions facilitated by the speakers and facilitators and supporters of AgBiz Masters. The participant information booklet is next. Really, there's kind of a quick process. If you look at the assignment checklist in the back, there's a quick process there that kind of goes through what you should do through AgBiz Masters. So first, you're going to review your module. Second, you're going to complete the module test, whether that's online or if you do text, there's a clear sleeve in the back of your binder that has the test and return, no postage necessary, return envelopes in there. So if you're doing text modules, simply complete the test, mail it to me via the envelope in there, or hand them into your facilitators at the meetings, and then I'll get those graded and back out to you and get those recorded for you. As you as you go through your modules, make sure to refer to that checklist. It also talks about participating in the discussion questions, doing making it your own exercises in the modules, and working on that portion of your business plan that David shared with us how important that was. And then obviously recording the date of the module completion just so you know that it's done there. So the making it your own exercises that we just briefly talked about, they're located in your modules. The modules will tell you specific details that you need to complete these exercises. That business plan, so really David hit the nail on the head when he talked about how he completed the module and then went and worked on that coinciding piece of the business plan. That really is a definite benefit of the AgBiz Masters program, and it can be a little bit overwhelming if you try to just take it one stab at it. So really throughout the program, the intent is for you to kind of complete your module, get your hands wrapped around that content, and then go write that section of the business plan. So by the end of year 2, you've got a complete business plan. And then recording that date, obviously, it's just a good visual to see all the pieces and parts of completing those modules. So the next flyer in your binder is troubleshooting tips. This is really geared towards those who are in the online modules. So this is really going to help you navigate and participate in the online modules. So if you have any questions, if you can't get the modules to launch, if it's just a black screen, or you can't open them, this is a great place to start to make sure that all of your system requirements are up to par for that. If you go through these and you still can't get access, please contact me. We'll get you going. Navigating Career Cafe is the next piece, and again, this is for the online modules. Really just talks about Career Cafe is the system that hosts the modules. So it's really just some instructions on how to get in there, your login information, and walking through each module there. Your workbook, each participant has a workbook, year 1 or year 2, so these are used in conjunction with your modules. There's activities in here associated with each module, so you read your module, it'll lead up to this, and then you go and work through these exercises in your workbook. A lot of these making it your own exercises are in here. So you'll want to make sure to complete those. And then last but not least, we've touched on it a couple times today, is this business plan template. So this is obviously one of many business plan templates. It's pretty comprehensive at about 27 pages, about 30-something pages there. But use these categories really as you feel best fit you in your operation and what you're trying to accomplish. So at the end of the 2 years, your business plan, don't feel like it has to look exactly like this and feel exactly like this. Really, you make it what you need it to be. And just use these categories as a good starting point here. This is just a good example. So throughout the next 2 years of the program, I'll be your main contact. So I can be reached by email or phone. All of that information, again, is located on that bright green tell-all sheet, that first page. As you attend these meetings and participate in the online discussions, like we've said about 5 million times today, we continually encourage you to build relationships. And you heard from both set of panelists how important that was to them, even after AgBiz concluded. So really take the time, invest in the program and build relationships with the other young and beginning farmers in your location, as well as your program facilitators and any partners that you may interact with as well. Really, graduates have over and over again identified this networking component as a great part of the program. So, and you heard that firsthand this morning. One thing that really makes AgBiz Masters different than other programs is that it's supported by other agricultural, organizations. And we briefly touched on this morning about the 25 industry supporters of the program. But really want to call out to you that the facilitators in your room are one of our biggest supporters, and we'll have many involved in future meetings and these in-person sessions as you attend. So really thank you guys for facilitating today and your commitment to continue to help facilitate the AgBiz Masters meeting. So can we give our facilitators and supporters here today a round of applause? So just a few quick housekeeping details. Remember to follow that timeline on the module completion and save those dates for the in-person sessions. We will touch base with you over the next few weeks for additional details and RSVP information for the January meeting. Of course, that date is there for you. Facilitators, if you could hand out surveys, participants complete those surveys and hand them back into facilitators if you don't have one already. Send facilitators need the sign-in sheets and any extra binders or meeting materials. We'll get those out to the participants who weren't able to attend today. So again, please don't hesitate to contact me if you have any questions or issues, especially with the online modules as we try to access those over the coming weeks. Really, we look forward to your participation in another AgBiz Masters season. We're excited that this is our 10th season this year, and we're excited to have you on board. So with that, we will wrap up. Hope you have great holidays, and we will see you in January. Thank you.
Thank you.